And here we are. Welcome back to the Redshirt Sophomore, where we never said that we are here week one preview. Okay. It's going to include a special guest by the name of Drewtamu. Okay. Not a stranger to the show. Okay. And we're recording this after the fact. I thought he was awesome, CD. I thought he was awesome.
Incredible.
It's always a great time having him on. He is a Texas A&M YouTube channel and Twitter personality. Make sure you follow him. I'll mention this several times. Go to his YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to him. Make sure you follow him on Twitter as well. This guy, he's all in on A&M. All right, and we asked him to cover some other games too, and provided us some very good research and different talking points as well. So I was thankful to have him in the studio as well. The guy that I am comfortable talking ball with. So thank you so much, Drew, for joining us. But real quickly, before we get to Drew and our preview picks, week 0 happened. And I was 0 for 2 on the show. Florida State minus 10.5. No. Or 11.5, whatever we picked to that. SMU minus 27.5. No. I mean, how about just the bees? You're over. You took. Dude, I went back and listened to our show, CD. You absolutely nailed something. Here's what you said verbatim. DJU is who DJU is.
Yep.
All right. Mm-hmm. And it's not that the loss was on DJU necessarily, but he is who he is. That's what you said. What I said was Florida State's going to try to run the ball. They tried to do that. And then DJU is DJU. And honestly, I'll blame this on Mark Norvell. And I know, not being able to stretch the ball downfield with DJU and you saw in the fourth quarter that he was able to a little bit, not letting him stretch the ball down the field. They just put 8 in the box. LaMiles Brooks had an unbelievable game for Georgia Tech, as well as, the other people in that defensive line and linebacker group. They shut down Florida State's running game after that first possession because they just put guys in the box and they didn't trust Mike Norvell to make the adjustments, and he didn't. Georgia Tech, and we said this is also what we nailed too, that there really isn't there's not a big coaching difference between these two coaches, because Georgia Tech's coaching staff, we've said it so many times, is one of the best coaching staffs in the ACC, and that was confirmed. So my takeaways that you were right. My takeaways are that you were right about DJU. Okay. Georgia Tech's coaching staff is unbelievable. Okay. And I'm also not extremely worried about Florida State's offensive line.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with how Georgia Tech played and tackled defensively outside of that first possession. I even tweeted, I was like, what are they still doing it too high? Get out of too high. What's the light box? And it's like, you had these offensive these linebackers that were way outside the gaps, and they were obviously in the wrong spots. They weren't failing hard. They weren't playing fast. They were thinking too much. They settled in. Credit to Santucci. Credit to Brent Key. And listen, man, that response, I had a buddy who was texting me throughout the whole game, and he said, Florida State's about to dominate this game. This is after that first possession. He said, FSU O-line looking scary. It was not you. It's FSU, like, and I was like, well, let's just see how Georgia Tech responds offensively. And they did, and they ended up controlling the football game. But let's be honest, let's not overreact here. And that's what we tend to do, right? We tend to do. Florida State's not going to go, 5-7, probably not. And Georgia Tech's not going to go 11-2 or 11-1, 11-2 at the conference championship. So we will see, obviously, in the coming weeks, how does Florida State, get back off the mat against Boston College? Does Georgia Tech have a major letdown, right, against, I think, Georgia State? Although Georgia State's not very good. But I was really pleasantly surprised with Georgia Tech defensively. Offensively, they did exactly how I thought they would. I thought I would see a little bit more explosiveness in that passing game. But also, we talked about Florida State's secondary and those corners being really good. Singleton got open a couple times, but they couldn't quite connect. But other guys stepped up. I talked about that, and I said, who's going to step up outside of Singleton? Lane made some big plays. Rutherford made some big plays. Avery Boyd was there too. I mean, it was good stuff all around. Team complimentary football by Georgia Tech. And the recruiting's going. I love it. I mean, what a game, first of all, to kick off college football. I mean, game day was great. The question marks I do have, and I had them at the show for Florida State at our show in the preview, was wide receiver talent, right? And we saw towards the end, Malik Benson started getting some separation. They started working in the middle of the football field, but that's because Georgia Tech was just blitzing and leaving it wide open. So good adjustment there for Florida State, but also that defensive line. I was not sold. I don't know where the hype came in all of a sudden that last week. ESPN, Pete Thamel, you saw their impact players when they introduced Florida State. It was all four defensive linemen. And I'm like, hold on. We don't know a ton about Marvin Jones consistently playing football. We don't know a ton about, Daryl Jackson and whatnot. And Patrick Payton, he's a really good football player, but he was also a 2 last year against opposite a really good football player in the NFL there. So we will see. Obviously, I think they'll grow and develop as they, play more together and get more adjusted. But to me, that's my concerns. If you're talking about Florida State not hitting its ceiling or hitting its floor, it's going to be because those position groups don't quite live up to the standard that I think internally they thought they would. And maybe the talent level has them there that they could be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they play a lot of in their defense. I don't think there's maybe like one, two other offensive lines in their schedule that probably compare to Georgia Tech's offensive line in Miami and Clemson, maybe Florida. So it will be interesting. I'm not ready to push the panic button on their defensive line yet. It is very concerning though. If there was a concern coming out for Florida State, it definitely was, of course, their offense. Specifically, I would, and then defensively, I think the defensive line more than anything else. For Georgia Tech, look, everyone was talking about how like Haynes King is like the truth. I think Haynes King played a good game. I just don't think he necessarily was the reason why Georgia Tech won that football game. I think him not turning the ball over was the reason why they won that football game. I mean, he almost blew it. I mean, he almost dropped the snap, before that
It
last
was a
field
weird,
goal.
it was a weird
It was a weird
communication with the snap
motion,
and the timing. The timing was weird
but it was,
on the
I don't know
road,
if that
kind
was
of.
his timing, if that was a center. Like, I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, if you're
Um,
gonna blame somebody, it's typically on the quarterback there. Although he did make some big time third down
he
plays.
did that one throw. Oh my God. That
That was
was
NFL,
a,
man.
that
That
was,
was NFL.
that was an unreal throw. And then the third down or the big scramble to get in the zone as well. Jamal Haynes, Lamiles Brooks, I thought were just so good for Georgia Tech, and that offensive line was awesome. So I'm very excited to see what this Georgia Tech team can do the rest of the season because this might not be the last team that they get or the last top 10 team that they get. You know what I'm
You
saying?
said it. If you are, they play some teams with really high win totals and high aspirations. I'm talking about Louisville. I'm talking about Notre Dame, Miami, Virginia Tech, and dare I say Georgia and North Carolina State. You cannot be watching that game and feel good about it. The only thing you feel good about is that maybe they got out of their system. Maybe it's not going to be a surprise when they come into your building and all of a sudden they got some road graders up front. Like secrets out. Like Georgia Tech is a scary football team this year. I think we knew that if you watched this show, but yeah,
So
to me,
facts.
it's interesting. Florida State, where are the stars, man? That last year you had Keon Coleman, you had Johnny Wilson. Obviously, Jordan Travis was a star for you. Trey Benson was a star for you offensively, and then defensively, you had some stars there too. Where are those guys? Where are they going to emerge, and how quickly? Because they're going to need them once they get an ACC schedule.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Let's talk about Syracuse and Nevada then.
It's SMU.
Or sorry, SMU and Nevada. Really good game from Nevada. Like defensively, they were causing problems with the SMU, and we talked about SMU's offensive line being a huge question mark, and that was something. Look, an offensive lines can get better as the season can go, but I don't think you're going to play a lot of worse defensive lines in Nevada. Now, I would say defensive line is one of their stronger positions on that defense for Nevada. And Jeff Choate, does a good job coaching up defensive line. I'm just maybe a little bit nervous for SMU. Of course, me taking the under 8.5, it felt really good. It would have felt better if SMU lost, but my takeaway from SMU, the offensive line is a little concerning. Okay. I didn't think they dominated in their front seven like they probably should have against Nevada. Like Nevada was able to run the ball like pretty effectively at times. And they didn't really have a great passing attack either. Brendan Lewis threw for 130 yards. His over under was like 128.5 going in the game. or opened at that. It closed at like 160 or something like that. Yeah, I'm like, so offensive line question marks. I thought the quarterback, I thought Preston Stone was fine. He was great in the second half. I feel good about him going forward. I feel good about Brashard Smith going over, or Brashard Smith going forward, which by the way I did not expect. I think this show that was something that we kind of missed. That Brashard Smith was going to be starting over Jalen Knight and LJ Johnson. So the fact that he's playing or can play well, I mean, I'm ecstatic. You got three guys there. After you lost one due to injury, so or another running back in the room due to injury. So yeah, I thought that was a miss. Nevada played an awesome game, man. The Mountain West could be a little frisky this year. That's all we're gonna say. What were your thoughts? What were your takeaways from the game?
I mean, to me, first of all, SMU, I guess we'll talk about them because Nevada deserves their props, right? At home, standalone game, new coach. You're bringing in a lot of new guys, and they played their tails off. They executed. Now, obviously, in that fourth quarter, it fell apart. And that just happens sometimes. The SMU's talented football team, well coached as well, and they just found their matchups, and you just couldn't stop RJ Maryland eventually. But you got to credit those guys. But SMU looking forward in their outlook, I mean, first of all, is there a quarterback competition continuing with Stone and Jennings? I know they both played. I know Jennings played well when he was in there,
Yeah.
and Stone kind of got settled in and had a good second half. But are we going to see two of those guys going forward? Because listen, I look at their schedule, right? And yes, you get next week to kind of get a tune up, but then BYU and then TCU, and then you're right into Florida State and Louisville. And those are tough football games early in your season that you're going to want to try to win and compete. And you got to have this stuff figured out. You got to figure your offensive line. Obviously, love to see Brashard Smith, like you said. Love to see RJ Maryland. I talked about, is there going to be a star emerge with that pass catching group? I was looking at the wide receiver room, but damn it, man, RJ Maryland, we knew he was good. He was really, really good. Now, can he dominate TCU? Can he dominate Florida State and Louisville like he did Nevada? That remains to be seen. But man, I wanted to see SMU impose their will, and they just couldn't. They didn't run the ball all that effectively, did they? And I know Smith had some nice carries, but I mean, Johnston struggled. Knighton struggled. It was, to me, I was like, really? This is a little disappointed for sure. But Nevada, man, deserves a ton of credit. Jeff Choate, man, get him some resources. Hopefully, there's more buy-in. I hope in that program. I think after seeing that, they've seen these results. Obviously, you would have loved to win. The Mountain West blew two games on that they should have probably won as big time underdogs in both of those. And so it'll be exciting to see those guys battle out once they get in conference play. But SMU, man, that's the story here is like, how do you respond, right? And are these problems fixable? And how quickly can you fix them? I really don't know. Offensive line is not a problem that you can solve quickly. You just can't. You can.
Yeah. That spread 27 and a half. It was larger than the largest spread of the biggest underdog last year. That was Texas State beating Baylor. It's 25.5 point underdogs, which by the end of the season, Texas State might have been favored against Baylor playing them again. I mean, not actually, but like
they were damn good.
It would have been close. The year before that, I forget exactly what team it was. The year before that, it was
Minnesota Bowling Green. You don't got to say it. I'll say it. Damn it, I'll say it. Probably was up there too. Was Bowling Green beating Georgia Tech too? I'll say that. But hey, listen, I do want to say this with SMU, and I look at Nevada's not a good offense, and Brendan Lewis is a very limited quarterback, but he gave them problems on the ground. And I look at their schedule, and I see some quarterbacks that could potentially give you some problems, especially later in your schedule. I'm looking at Virginia, right, in Calandra. I'm looking at Boston College. Obviously, I'm looking at, Shuck. Do they run Shuck at Louisville at times? Florida State, obviously, DGU doesn't love to run, but he can. Hoover is
they
there.
loved running him at Clemson.
Yeah, so we'll see. Gary Bohannon, if he's healthy, I kind of like him on the ground at BYU. That could give you problems as well. I mean, SMU, and we were not as high as we should have, but we as most people were on them, I think. We both took their under pretty convincingly. And it kind of came out to fruition. All these problems we were seeing was like, well, offensive line. Well, no stars at wide receiver. Well, defense. I mean, how are you gonna? And so it's like, I guess it's just concerning for sure. But obviously, it's not overreaction. We can't overreact. The season's not over. They won the football game, and they can move
Oh
on
yeah,
to Houston Christian and rebound. The great news about playing week 0 is you win, you get that extra bye week. So you have 3 bye weeks that you can regroup, get healthy, self scout, and get ready for the rest of your season.
absolutely. And with that, let's put week 0 in the past and let's talk about week 1. Let's get over to our buddy Drewtamu as we preview 8 games on this week 1 slate, picking spreads, picking underdogs, and we'll also give you, or sorry, picking spreads, picking winners, and also some underdogs, and maybe a little best bets at the counter. All right, next. Welcome in Drew from Drewtamu. Yep, the Twitter personality, the YouTube channel. He's got it all. Guys, if you like Texas A&M football content, you have to check out his content on YouTube. It's fantastic. That's just Drewtamu. Okay, you need to check it out. All right, he's got great Notre Dame previews. He had great offseason stuff. He's gonna be having stuff every week for Texas A&M if you're a fan. So, and look, there's a reason we brought him on the show. All right, because there happens to be a particularly important game in College Station this week, involving I don't know 2 top 25 teams, maybe a brand new coach over there in College Station. Isn't that right, Drew?
That's right, man. It's going to be exciting stuff. One of the best Kyle Field atmospheres in recent history, college game day. I mean, you could go on and on with the storylines, man. I'm glad we're going to feature that game today. But there's a lot of good games in week 1, man.
Oh, certainly, CD. I mean, you got your. We're going to be previewing your team as well, the Minnesota Gophers. I mean, like, how are you feeling about week 1? First of all, is everyone like just absolutely jacked up for week
Dude,
1? Like, I mean,
I'm
like
I'm so
week
jacked.
0 was awesome, and we got 2 games or 3 games that were like way too good, right? That we thought were going to be all kind of blowouts. That ended up being really good games, but so we're kind of spoiled with that. But now we're in week 1. We're in the absolute thick of it. We got plenty of matches. We're talking about 8 games to guys. 8 games today, guys. So we got plenty to talk about. But is that the
We're
sentiment
back.
that you're feeling, CD?
Yeah, I'm excited, man. I've been waiting. I've been way too long. I'm excited to get back up to Minneapolis. I've been in Chicago working and doing school for the summer, and I'm just ready to get back to it. The Golden Gophers cannot wait. Thursday night, Fox primetime game. It's going to be a great atmosphere, a great scene. Mac Brown is coming to Minneapolis, which will be just a treat in itself. So I'm excited. But let's get into this. We got a lot to talk about, a lot to get into, and obviously, thank you, Drew, for coming on.
Of course. And hey, real quick, CD, I was just in Chicago myself this last weekend.
I
And
saw
I
that on
actually,
Twitter.
yes, I documented it. And I actually caught that FSU Georgia Tech game at an FSU bar. And man, it was kind of sad. I felt kind of bad, but it was fun.
Oh
That's
gosh.
crazy. You found an FSU bar in Chicago. That's awesome.
I know.
Shit, man. I hope you enjoyed it. Obviously, Chicago's fun in the summer. You can't beat it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good time, but I'm excited to learn more about some of these teams. Y'all keep really good track of your stuff. So I'm excited to learn from you guys and try to put my picks out there and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, make sure if you guys are watching this video, we have one rule, right? If you like the content, like the video. All right. That's easy enough. Also, I would consider subscribing because CD and I are going to be doing this at a big macro scale. Okay. But also, you need to, of course, like and subscribe to Drew Tamu here. Thanks for coming on. This is not the first time he's been on the show. All right. This is a good thing we got going here, Drew. We like having you on. You talk good ball when it comes to Texas A&M and SEC football. I'll say that.
Thank you, man. Yeah, we're expanding today, so we'll see how I do. We'll go back and see how I picked out. But if any of my people are in here, y'all subscribe to the Redshirt Sophomore. These guys absolutely know their stuff, man.
All right. And with that, let's head over to Gainesville in the swamp. Let's talk about Miami versus Florida, a game that, I mean, are we forgetting that this is a 2.5 point game, the spread? I mean, like, this is going to be a dogfight. Okay. This is like Florida with a lot of big boys, a lot of big bodies over there playing against Miami team that, quite frankly, can we trust Mario Cristobal in a hostile environment in a big game? I don't know, right? And you're looking at a guy who absolutely pounded the Miami over 9 wins because that's just how talented this team is. Good enough to win the ACC championship. And, you feel better about that even after last week. When Florida State falls to a conference team in Georgia Tech, there's a lot going on here. Billy Napier potentially on the hot seat as well. I mean, I'm all over this game. I will have my eyes absolutely peeled to the TV for this game. I cannot wait. Rivalry game. The state of Florida is going to be going bonkers Of course, Miami and Florida laughing at Florida State last weekend with their results in their game. I'm excited to see Cam Ward in a new uniform. I'm excited to see Damian Martinez in a new uniform. I'm excited to see that Miami front seven and also as well as their offensive line see like how they compete against this Florida team, which themselves have some pretty decent bodies. I think on both sides of the line of scrimmage. How do y'all feel about this game right now? I mean, it's 2.5-point favorites. 2.5.
Yeah, I'll go first on this one because I'll say this game is keep me up at night a little bit, because I was just going through on my last show I was going through who I have winning each conference. I was between Clemson, Miami. I was FSU until we saw FSU. And I'm leaning Miami for the ACC, but this game scares me for them. This is a toss-up game in my mind. I mean, they're taking this talented roster on the road, and it could really go either way. Despite what you expect out of Miami and what you expect out of Florida on each given year, I think that kind of is neutralized early in the year. If they're catching Florida later in the year, it could be a different story. But Florida's alive. They have talent. Miami has everything you could want, top to bottom, besides maybe a secondary. But Florida could be a team that exploits that. Florida could, exploit the one hole on this Miami team. I'm leaning Miami, but I don't feel very confident in it, man. I'm scared for their chances. They're my playoff pick. They're my week one bye in the playoff. But I think that's largely on the line in week one. This could really go either way. How do you feel, CD?
Listen, I have no idea. I almost feel like third person anxiety for both of these fan bases, these coaching stats, because so much is online. Crazy enough to say in a week one rivalry game like this is. Obviously, Billy Napier, a lot has been made of that schedule and his future long term at Florida, but also the pressure has never been higher at Miami recently, especially with Mario Cristobal, to win and to convert with this talented roster, especially after seeing the gap wide open. You mentioned Florida State struggling just a week ago, along with Clemson's, inability to use the portal, whatever. So like it is Miami's ACC for the taking and eventually moving into the playoffs. But obviously you have to go on the road and win against a talented Florida team. Yes, I took their over at 4.5 wins, but 4.5 does not tell you the story about the talent on this team. I see a really, really good defensive back room potentially. I think a potential. And obviously, that quarterback room with Lagway, it'd be interesting to see how much they use him. Obviously, I think Mertz will be the feature. But to me, it's about consistency on both sides of the football. We've seen these teams be undisciplined. We've seen lack of consistency, lack of tackling, and those things all tend to show up in week one, right? We saw that in week 0, right? It'll be really exciting to see. I mean, you've got portal talent. You've got, different matchups between the secondary of Florida versus Cam Ward and the wide receivers of Miami. And then you've got Miami trying to stop the run, of Florida's. So it'll be really interesting. And then also the coaching stats and matchups and what you have on the field there and what you've seen in the past couple of years. It's really interesting. I think obviously this will be something I'll be tuned into 2:30 Central Time on ABC. I cannot wait to see. And obviously we've seen teams in week one go in and struggle against bad Florida teams. We saw a couple years ago, Utah go in there and Anthony Richardson did his thing. And obviously they got the win there and Utah went on to win the Pac-12. It beat USC, beat Caleb Williams. So obviously the season's not over for Miami. To me, I see almost a little bit more pressure on Florida because of that schedule and because of this opportunity you have at home against a team you are, almost as talented as potentially, that you have a chance to steal one early in the season and get some momentum before that schedule gets really tough in November.
So is that you going with Florida plus 2.5?
No. Give me Miami to win and give me Miami to cover.
All right. That's what
because I think that the talent is just too there, even with all those portal names and those additions. To me, what I look for is offensive line and running game. It's going to be a hot day in Gainesville. I do think that those guys can lean with Damian Martinez and everyone else there with Miami. Experienced, big, talented offensive line. Mark Fletcher coming back, right? I even Cam Ward's going to get a lot of attention, but I think they're Cristobal and obviously Shannon Dawson. They're really going to commit to running the football, and I think that's going to be the difference in this football game.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see Restrepo and Jacoby George with Cam Ward at the helm. It's going to be a fun receiving duo there. They got all the tools, man. They have all the weapons. It's just this week one hurdle. I kind of see a little bit of a weird parallel between them and Notre Dame. It's like they have a lot to play for this year, but just a huge week one, test. It's going to be a sloppy game, man. 2:30 at the Swamp in August. I mean, damn.
Can't wait. Also, too, something that Florida struggled to do last year. And I do think Miami's secondary is the weak part of their defense. Okay. And Graham Mertz played pretty good football last year, and they have 3 pretty decent receivers there in that Florida receiving room. But when I look at Florida offensively, if they try to run the ball, I don't know that they're going to be able to do it. Like, they didn't run the ball all that effectively last year, despite what, people might think. I think they were like 83rd in rushing yards per game. And now some of that was game script, of course, because being down in some of those games and having to score a lot because your defense was not very effective. You lose Trevor Etienne in the portal, right? He was an explosive runner. And then Montrell Johnson, look, guys, he had arthroscopic knee surgery in August, right? Like 2 days ago, Billy Napier described him as week to week.
I didn't know that. Damn.
Does that sound like he's going to play on Saturday? Because I don't know if that sounds like he's going to play on Saturday. And then what do you have after him? Obviously you still have talent there with Trey and Webb and Cam Carroll, but guys that, they're still talented, but they're no Montrell Johnson, right? Like, this was going to be the feature back of this offense.
Yeah.
And with Miami's defensive front there, feels like it could be difficult. Florida might get a little one-dimensional here. I'm going to go Miami. I'm going to lay the 2.5. Obviously, Miami to win. So it looks like we're all in kind of agreement right there. But look, that doesn't mean that Florida can't win this game, because I do think that this Florida team is going to steal a win somewhere. You just have to find out. You got to figure out when it is, right? It could be week 1, right? Because we see a lot of that happen week 1, where teams come off to a slow start, and a team coached by Mario Cristobal is always susceptible to losing the football game in the fourth quarter. But I just I think I like this matchup too much. And Cam Ward might not even have a great first week, and I can't wait for people to overreact, because Florida's secondary is unreal. And I can't wait for people to overreact and say Cam Ward in Miami, oh my gosh, DJ. No, Cam Ward is really good, and he's going to be really good throughout this entire season. If he doesn't look perfect in this week 1, just know that Florida's secondary is kind of really freaking talented.
Listen, I want to ask you guys a question real quick before I move on. In terms of, you kind of mentioned fourth quarter with Mario Cristobal. If this does get to a fourth quarter game, right? And we are obviously, Vegas expects that to do so with that 2.5 point line. If Miami, is in a dogfight, we saw Georgia Tech and Florida State. We saw Georgia Tech just kind of out execute them with their last 2 drives, just going down the field, bleeding clock, winning on third down, right? And obviously kicking that game-winning field goal. If this gets to the fourth quarter, obviously it's anyone's ball game, but who do you feel more comfortable with? Is it Miami and Cam Ward, or is it Florida with, because the experience of Mertz and home field advantage? Where are you kind of leaning? I want to hear from both of you guys.
I'm going to lean Miami in that kind of situation. I just trust the trenches more with Miami. I trust their front 7 more. I trust their offensive line more. I know they have a running back. I know they can have a more diverse attack. I'm going to trust the team that can bring it all. And I heard in a Cristobal presser today that he now has a clock management specialist on staff. So whatever that's worth, it's got to be worth at least a win, right?
At least
Miami.
Sounds like it's worth 2.5 points, but yeah, I'll lean with you there, Drew, as well. I do like. I think Shannon Dawson's fine. I think he's fine.
Yeah.
Look, Billy Napier hasn't shown that he can necessarily win ball games at Florida either. Both kind of bringing in talented teams in their own right. I don't know. It's kind of like in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. In terms of game management. Although I think that's a little bit disrespectful to Billy Napier, because I do think Billy Napier is okay in game management, but haven't seen it, these last 2 seasons, I guess. But I'm with you, Drew. I'll lean that direction. I'm imagining, CD, that you're going to do that too, and people might call us crazy for leaning on Mario Cristobal in the fourth quarter.
It's that personnel. You can't talk me out of that personnel, especially. We've gone this long without mentioning Ruben Bain, and he obviously could have a field day when it comes to that fourth quarter, because honestly, I don't know how I feel about Florida's tackles and what they can do. And it's not just Ruben Bain either, right? You got Alston, you've got those talented freshmen, you've got obviously, CJ Clark's not necessarily a pass rusher, but Simeon Barrow interior as well. Too many guys, too many weapons is from that defensive line of Miami. I think that could be the difference. I'm with you with Drew, with the trenches there.
All right, let's head on over then to our second game. Let's head over. I believe this game is in Atlanta, Charlotte. CD, you're going to have to correct me on this one. Clemson.
Mercedes-Benz, yeah.
Mercedes-Benz. Clemson is 13.5 point dogs against the Georgia Bulldogs. And CD and I have had this discussion multiple times about, what is Clemson going to actually be? But we know one thing, that Georgia is a top 2 team in college football across the board. Every position, there are no holes, no matter where you look. Not on the offensive line, not on the defensive line, not in that linebacker core, which is nuts. That secondary, despite some of those depth portal losses, they still have talent there. Of course, Malachi Starks, just to name one. They're loaded everywhere, right? And sure, you lose a wide receiver to maybe some off the field troubles in recent weeks, but you still have a good talented receiver. Maybe not a star, but I feel like it's kind of the same with Clemson's wide receiver room. I don't know if you have necessarily a star receiver that you can look for, like those star playmakers. I know, Chris, you're going to say Antonio Williams, but I don't know. This game is really interesting because I think Clemson's defense can keep them in this game, and we've seen Georgia offenses. While sure, Georgia was top 5 in points per game, top six in yards per game, the top 20 in both rushing and passing attacks last year. They had a good offense last year, but sometimes it took them a little bit to get going in certain games. Looked at that Missouri game, looked at that Auburn game. So I'm interested to see what Clemson's defense kind of brings out there in the first half, and see if they can keep it close and maybe make something happen.
Well, are you going to trust a year 2 bump under Garrett Riley for? Oh my goodness, blinking on names here. Clemson quarterback, help me out.
Kate Klubnik.
Yeah, you got it.
What was it? 11 interceptions, 8 fumbles last year. Just a mess. Receiver room, question marks. I like Phil Maffa. Question marks at the offensive line, though. I love him. I love him. Who's behind him? That's a question I have, too. I just think they're banking on a huge leap at that quarterback position, and I don't know if it's there. Like I said, year 2 bump could be nice, but this Georgia defense, you lose a lot of players in that secondary, but they bring a lot back. They're 2 deep with 5-star talent and safety. They have talent everywhere. This is, typical Georgia reload. And yeah, they lose the big names on offense. They lose the McConkey. They lose the Brock Bowers. But Dominic Lovett was their best statistical receiver last year, I'm pretty sure. And, obviously
McConkey was hurt.
Yeah, he missed games.
And so did Bowers. Both of them missed games. They were still good without those 2 guys.
Exactly. Oscar Delp, amazing tight end, blocking tight end. Ben Urasek, one of the best tight ends in the Pac-12 on their team now.
Fantastic. No one's talking about it. No one's talking about it.
Exactly. They're going to have a stable at running back starting with Trevor Etienne. Is he healthy? He's healthy, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
I don't know why I thought maybe he wasn't.
They are 5 running backs deep. So if he does not play, I'm actually the least bit concerned. You're looking at the Robinsons. They're loaded there. Not worried about that at all. So you're absolutely right to say that.
Yeah. And another potential Joe Moore Award finalist offensive line again. It's going to happen. It's going to be a typical Georgia team. I'm banking on it. I have them in the playoff. I have them winning the SEC. I don't think Clemson has a chance in this game, and I think Georgia's covering.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Etienne, he had that off-field issues. We're kind of waiting on if suspension happens, and
I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, It's way too late to announce one. But you also have Branson Robinson there, who we talked about earlier this year, who is a stud, who was hurt a year ago. But listen, I like Clemson, and I picked their over. I have a ticket for them to win the ACC. I feel pretty good about what they can do. After week 1, it's just I look at the matchup here, and I look at Georgia, and I look at Clemson, and I kind of see, if Georgia is an A- overall football team, a football team, then Clemson's a B+. Everything that Georgia does, Clemson kind of does just a little bit worse. And I look at quarterback, wide receiver, you've got an inexperienced cornerback room, but talented. Everything I kind of see, it's just I can't find edges. I look for a chance for an upset, and where is Clemson going to exploit a matchup on Clemson's? Where's Clemson going to exploit a matchup on Georgia's roster? I'm sorry. Maybe if they're shutting down Carson Beck and that passing offense. I don't love the receiving room of Georgia. I love the depth. I love the upside with Humphreys and whatnot, but I don't think I love the elite high-end guys. If you run into
better than Clemson's receiver room.
That's what I'm saying. That's my point. It's like anything, anything Georgia can do, Clemson can do just a little bit worse. So that's my problem. And then I look in the trenches too, and it's maybe you find the edge if Georgia's interior guys aren't quite what they're up to being, a year ago or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, right back in their championship runs. It's a big question. I mean, there's a lot of storylines too here. Georgia's upset. They are pissed off after losing the SEC championship game, missing the playoffs, and you saw they took out their frustrations on Florida State. They've spent a whole offseason hearing about Ohio State, hearing about Caleb Downs going there, and all this other good stuff. Nick Saban retiring and how he beat Georgia and whatever, whatever. I think they're really upset. I'm going to go Georgia to win, but I do just listen. I don't think this is going to be Oregon, Georgia a couple years ago, right? And that was 50-point domination. I think it's going to be a ball game. I think in the second half, I think Georgia probably pulls away, but I'll go Clemson to cover, and I'll kind of middle it there. I know it's kind of soft taking that middle spot, but I don't know. I just see what Clemson can do in keeping this game close. Obviously, maybe quite having the top end talent to pull away, just because Georgia is so damn good, man. But obviously, yeah, you mentioned it, Drew. I'm excited to see how Klubnik does in year 2, what he can do against this defense in a hostile environment. Because yes, it's a neutral site game, but it's in Atlanta, right? It's not that far from Athens. Obviously, Clemson will travel, but I know the Bulldogs will as well. So
I have a question for you guys on this game. I have this game about a 20-point win for Georgia. What is Matt Luke worth?
Well, Christopher, I'll let you answer that.
So I like their offensive line this year. It is a lot in part due to Matt Luke and what he's done there. Maximizing that talent. I mean, they got talent there. Tristan Lay was a talented kid, right? Arthur Parks can get it done. Blake Miller looking good in camp as well at tackle. There's a lot of guys there. Is the depth? I mean, you lose 4 guys that played a lot of snaps for you last year, so the depth maybe not quite there yet. But yeah, I'm with you on Matt Luke. I think it's a big time deal. Maybe not in this game in terms of winning the football game, but the development long term of the program, but also throughout the season. I think it's absolutely massive. I mean, a lot of them made of you mentioned Garrett Riley, right? But Luke might be just as important to that offense as Riley is.
Yeah, I look at Clemson during their dynasty. It's strong offensive line, elite receivers, and is that back? Maybe O-line's back. I don't see it with the receivers just yet.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you. We've had
We'll
this
see
debate.
what happens. Yeah,
We've had this debate. Me and Steve have had this debate. Glad to hear that someone else is on my side.
Sorry, CD. I'll try to get you back later in the vid.
I appreciate that. No, that's fair.
And you probably will. There's plenty of games to talk about. Also for the running back room. So Roderick Robinson is likely out.
Yeah.
So my guess is Kirby Smart. With that, probably Trevor Etienne maybe doesn't deserve a suspension all of a sudden because, they might need it. But all of a sudden, Branson Robinson, CD, we were talking about him in the offseason. We made that whole video about him. And that might be paying. What if the YouTube algorithm just does us favors because we're the only one with a Branson Robinson video out there? That'd be awesome. But y'all check that. If Branson Robinson pops off and has like 200 yards, make sure to check that video out. So yeah, he's kind of a dog. Might be a sneaky fantasy pickup. Not gonna lie, might be sneaky fantasy pickup.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah, so I'm gonna good work, Drew. So I'm gonna also take Georgia and a cover as well. I mean it's in Atlanta. Right? Is that what we said? You said it was
it's at Mercedes-Benz there, yeah. So at least Chick-fil-A will be serving, which is good.
Yeah, that's nice.
That's Georgia Tech country now. They're reestablishing Atlanta.
Yes, it is. Look at the recruiting, man. Look at the recruiting.
It is, but yeah, feed me this Georgia team. I mean, this team is just in so many ways better than this Clemson team. And you know what? I said that last week about SMU Nevada. And it took a fourth quarter RJ Maryland masterclass for SMU to beat Nevada. But this offensive line, the difference is this offensive line, like I actually know what it's going to be. Like the SMU, like we talked about, it might not be great. It might not be great. Look, I anticipate SMU running the ball a lot, but are they going to be able to do well? And the answer was no. Like Brashad Smith was okay, but like the answer was no. And this Georgia offensive line is so good. So good. I know Clemson has that front seven that's pretty solid there too, but what happens in your secondary now? You're relying on a lot of young guys. I know we talked about the receivers for Georgia not being necessarily elite, but how about we account for the youth in the cornerback room for Clemson? Not necessarily the safeties, but the cornerback room, right? So, yeah, I'm there as well. See, did you take Clemson to cover? Or you take Georgia to cover?
Clemson to cover.
Okay, all right. See, we're fading you a little bit there, but yeah, this is going to be an awesome game. I'll be tuned in. Let's move on now.
I hope Clemson covers. I want a fun game. I mean, I want Georgia to get scared. I want to see it, but that's why you play the game. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I look at that 11 o'clock window and I see a bunch of games that could be intriguing in the fourth quarter. So if that game's a blowout, I'm gonna change it over to a different channel. We're gonna talk about a team here soon, but I'm with you. Let's go Clemson, I think.
Well, let's go Gophers. The alma mater of CD over here is playing against North Carolina at home, and this line has flip-flopped based on, maybe some injury rumors about a particularly important piece to this offense in Darius Taylor, the running back for Minnesota, as well as lingering issues, quote unquote, with Daniel Jackson, which we don't really know about. But if that offense is missing Daniel Jackson, I think he's more important to the offense than Darius Taylor. Am I wrong in saying that, Christopher, or is that an overreaction?
The problem is you can't. It's hard to say that because they run the ball 50 fucking times a game, right? So it's like you don't know. But Daniel Jackson, the drop off from Daniel Jackson to anybody else in that room is significant, not only because of the pressure he takes from a defense, but also because the consistency of those guys just has not been there, right, for years now. And Darius Taylor, yes, he's absolutely very, very good, but they won games without him last year, and they brought in 5 transfers. They got a true freshman going off in camp right now. So obviously they feel much better about the depth of the running back room. But Darius Taylor, he is a game changer. And we saw him torch UNC last year as a true freshman on the road. Those 2 injuries, something to absolutely monitor when they bring out that injury report, 2 hours before kickoff or whatever it may be. The unfortunate part is I'm going to be in Minnesota, which gambling is unfortunately illegal there. So I can't even pound North Carolina in the stands there. I'll just be sitting there watching them, whatever it may be. But yeah, I want to hear you guys' thoughts on this game because I'm probably a little biased here, I won't lie, but I see a lot of good matchups. I see some interesting storylines. You guys know Max Johnson more than I would, and a lot of North Carolina fans potentially. Obviously, they might run Drew 2 quarterback, but yeah. Johnson.
Yeah, I was high on Max Johnson. I liked his tape coming out of LSU. I liked him in his first half start last year versus Auburn. But things just fell apart, man, and he did not have the best runway to play, though. Let's talk about that Tennessee game, maybe the worst Max Johnson game of the year. But the O-line gave him no time. He didn't have a chance. And you'll have to talk to me about this North Carolina offensive line. That's probably going to make or break Max Johnson. Max Johnson needs time. That's how I feel about him. But I want to hear more about Minnesota because I'm actually high on Minnesota based on my limited information. I know Chris Dawson will give me the rundown. I see an offensive line returning 4 starters. I see adding Power 5 receivers in the portal. Talk to me about those guys. But I think if Darius Taylor's healthy, I don't see why you can't beat North Carolina at home. I don't see why you can't cover. 2 deep is back at defense for the most part. 9 starters back. You got to talk me out of Minnesota in this game because I'm hitting Minnesota on this one. This is when I make a play on.
I'll be able to do that, but Christopher,
we'll start with the positives here. Yeah, so I took Minnesota's over, I guess, on our show. I didn't obviously, put money on it, but I took their over 5.5 throughout the year just because I think, the depth is much improved this year, and I do think where they really, really struggled last year was stopping the run. And their linebackers were awful. Coney Lindenberg, Matthew joked about it. I think he's an absolute bona fide all Big Ten kind of guy. He was hurt much of last year. And they were having question marks about the guy next to him, right? So it was going to be him and a new guy. Devin Williams and Maverick Borowski were kind of battling out. But when Cody Lindenberg goes down and he's not able to play and he re-injures that a couple weeks later, you got 2 inexperienced guys that are learning on the fly in the Big Ten, drinking through a fire hose. That is never a good sign. And you saw that Purdue put up a bajillion points and 300 plus yards on the ground. And that could be the problem because O'Marion Hampton is a monster, I know Matthew's got some side bets on that. He is a monster. And obviously that offensive line is question mark for North Carolina. That's where I think the advantage is.
Huge question mark.
The advantage for Minnesota is that defensive line, especially if you get into pass rushing downs, because you've got either an inexperienced quarterback and Connor Harrell, right? And then you've got Mac Johnson, who has struggled to get the ball on time. Yeah, Mac Brown, I don't trust anything he really says, to be honest. We'll see.
True. But he's no stranger to the 2 quarterback system.
He's not at all.
Mac Brown seems unhinged in his age. I kind of like it.
Yeah,
he's ready to. They got a little petty match going on between PJ and Mac Brown. PJ does not release depth charts ever, and so Mac Brown was like, okay, then we won't either. And it's kind of funny to see the back and forth there. I think there's some history between those 2, like good history, I think.
Yeah.
But to me, that defensive line, what you can do on 3rd and long, 2nd and long, with Ja Joyner, who's a monster. Danny Strigout getting better. Devin Eastern is flashing in the interior there. Anthony Smith, you can move up and down the line of scrimmage. Could be really, really exciting, but you have to get to that spot. And you're also up the middle of that defense. You also are replacing, all-world Tyler Nubin, obviously second-round pick to the Giants, all-time leading interception holder for Minnesota. And you got two inexperienced guys there too. So it's going to be a lot of question marks, and it's not a good time to be learning in week one, obviously, about your team, especially stopping the run. But that'll be the difference there. If I had to go anything, I'm with you. Let's go Minnesota, and let's go them to win. I think that 1.5 is some value, especially if Daniel Jackson does play, which I think he will. I think there's absolute value in that. And then also Max Brosmer, what he can do throwing the football much more consistently than Ethan Kaliak-Banis did. And dare I say Tanner Morgan as well. Minnesota fans might not like that, but Max Brosmer, I like him a lot. He comes from New Hampshire, put up a lot of yards there, utilized his playmakers up and down the football field, got on the football in space, with the ball on target so they could run after catch. We'll see. I'm obviously pretty optimistic, pretty excited about this game. Could I be proven wrong? Absolutely. And I can't wait for Matthew to do that right now.
Well, here's the thing. It's like, I actually don't hate the matchup for Minnesota here, right? They get them at home. That offensive line, like North Carolina's front seven is probably strong suit of their defense. They have a couple good players in their secondary, but, K'Mon Rucker, Power Echols, right? Like having a good offensive line really helps, right? Like, and leaving that secondary out on some islands. The question is Max Brosmer going to take advantage of it, right? A guy who on the show maybe I've called Check Down Charlie a couple times. I think he's a good quarterback, guys. And then I don't want that to be misconstrued in any way, despite that very much sounding like an insult. I do think Darius Taylor is a big loss because he's such an effective receiver. Obviously he played receiver in high school. Like that's, definitely a strength of his. What Chris was referring to in the American Hampton is I took him as over 90.5 rushing yards on Prize Picks yesterday. It's at 99.5 already. Got literally played up 9 yards there. So I feel pretty good about that because I don't love Minnesota's front seven aside from Cody Lindenberg and John Joyner,
And John Joyner is not a run specialist by any means.
Not at
they
all.
are going to wait to put him on the field until they can on 3rd and long, but you got to get there. You got to get there first.
Here's what scares the piss out of me though. Like that's North Carolina offensive line isn't like so unproven, right? Like it is very maybe potentially not great. Also playing two quarterbacks, like look, you saw it in SMU, right? Like Preston Stone maybe just needed a couple more drives to like get in a rhythm, and like that was completely stripped away from him, having Kevin Jennings, who actually played pretty okay. But I think Connor Harrell is a better quarterback than Max Johnson because Max Johnson, time to throw last year, fun fact, Connor Wigman, 2.5 seconds on average. Max Johnson, 3 seconds flat. An entire half second. Max Johnson.
Like Justin Fields type.
Yeah. That's he's just holding on to the football, man, waiting to get clobbered. So that scares me big time. I also think that if Darius Taylor's not in the game, I think North Carolina has more superstar talent than Minnesota. Sorry to offend you there, Christopher. And I think they'll be able to run the ball. Hopefully behind an offensive line that still has a lot of question marks. I just don't trust that Minnesota front seven. I'll take North Carolina -1.5. I don't love it. I really don't. Otherwise, you would have seen it. You would see it on the best bets. That's coming up later in the show. I don't love it, but definitely interesting.
Thursday night game, right?
Yeah,
Thursday night, and
nice.
both defensive coordinators. By the way, we talked about two defenses that maybe have question marks. Both of them have brand new defensive coordinators, so definitely something interesting. We saw what a coaching change, literally on Saturday with Georgia Tech. We saw what a defensive coaching change can do for some teams. So it's hard to see what's going to look like in week one.
Last thing I will say, in terms of storyline, so obviously in 2023 last season, Minnesota went down to Chapel Hill and lost 31-13, but that was with Drake May. Minnesota was in that football game in that second half, and they just could not complete passes to open receivers, and they couldn't cover. I'm forgetting the McCollum, the Georgia Tech transfer, named McCollum.
Yeah.
For anything. And Drake May also, they'd get to 3rd down and he would just do something crazy. And there's a reason why he was the top 3 pick last year, right? And he would do something like the wrist or scramble. And so I think the optimism for the Minnesota fans is, well, they don't have Drake May. And so maybe we have a chance. But you mentioned the star power North Carolina still has with Rucker and Hampton and Power Eccles as well. The coaching matchups, yeah, you mentioned that. You hit that right in the nose. The defense coordinators, obviously, you think a similar scheme will be run by both those guys, but it'll obviously be put to the test there on Thursday night primetime Fox. Joel Klatt, Gus Johnson. I cannot wait. Those guys are great. Too bad I won't listen to them, but I watched the replay.
Let's head over to Morgantown, where West Virginia takes on Penn State as an 8.5-point underdog. This Penn State team, look, there's a lot of good things going on for them. But West Virginia, I think maybe people aren't talking about them enough as a sleeper because of this really difficult schedule that they have, and maybe the potential to win the Big 12 isn't necessarily there. But and definitely some question marks on the defensive side of the football. But look, I like Garrett Green. I like their running back room. I love their offensive line. And I think coaching staffs, beat writers, I think they're a little bit higher in this wide receiver room than we've seen in this West Virginia team in a little bit of time. Now you're talking about a Penn State team who was third in the country in points per game allowed, second in the country in yards per game allowed, and first in the country in run defense last year. So this is no slouch of a defense. And I know we talked about it in our preview a little bit, CD, but this defense is still nuts. All right. It's still going to be absolutely nuclear. There's no Manny Diaz there, though. He heads over to be the head coach at Duke. Instead, oh no, we bring in Tom Allen, another guy with insane experience as well, who literally had a Power 5 head coaching job last year at Indiana. So I don't know how much of a drop off that's going to be. It'll look different. I think it'll look different, but I'm certainly intrigued by this game. I think Penn State matches up really well with West Virginia because I think Penn State, for a team that struggled offensively last year, Drew Aller might need a nice little game to get settled in, playing against a kind of a weak team. And look, West Virginia got lucky last year. Admitted fans, Beanie Bishop, you got lucky with him. Okay. You got so and Steve will tell you, because he was a Minnesota guy. See, y'all got lucky with him. And look, are these transfer portals in the secondary? Are they Beanie Bishop? Are you going to magically land a guy who's all of a sudden going to become an All-American, right? After he couldn't even see the field on a not very depth in a cornerback room that wasn't very deep for Minnesota. So that I don't know that that's going to happen. So, but again, I on our show, our preview seat, I did take West Virginia's over 6.5, so I'm still high on this team. But interested to hear y'all's thoughts on this game. Drew, give me what you got.
Yeah, you said it. I love the trio of Green, White, and the bruiser Donaldson. It's like Pat White, Steve Slayton all over again, almost in a way. With that offensive line, it's all there. But with that defense, it is the perfect canvas for Andy Kotelnicki and Drew Aller to kick things off on the right foot. There's too much opportunity with that defense, I think. I would love to see a West Virginia team that upsets Penn State at home in week 1. That's just fun. That's just what I grew up with. I love to see that scrappy trio of weapons in the backfield. I want to see it. But I have Penn State in the playoff. I think their schedule lines up very nicely for them. Winning 10 games this year is very much on the table, in my opinion. And I just don't think West Virginia has the defense to keep up in this game. Although I would like to see them win. It's just a fun team to watch. I just don't see it. And, maybe Penn State takes a step back with Manny Diaz gone. Maybe that's a thing. They lose those 3 DBs to the NFL. But they have enough. I think they have enough. And what is this? This is Penn State minus 8.5. I don't know if that's a cover, but I have Penn State winning this game.
Yeah, maybe? I think what a different narrative it is going into this game than it was a year ago. Last year, West Virginia was picked to finish last in the Big 12, and they go on and kind of one of the surprise teams of college football. Obviously, they lost this game last year on the road in Happy Valley, which most teams do, by the way. No shame in that. And obviously, Penn State and Drew Aller had a field day. He had over 300 yards. They didn't quite get the running game going like we thought they would, and that kind of never really came to fruition, all throughout. But this is a much different scenario. This is an under 10-point line. You are at home. You feel like you can actually win this football game. And I think it's a great sign for Neil Brown and West Virginia moving forward. But I'm with you guys. I think Penn State is just going to overwhelm them with this talent. I think Drew Aller and Kotelnicki, Drew hit up right on the head. This is going to be a perfect get-right game for them to really display what they're going to be changing and looking much, much better and more fluid and timely and in structure and just ahead of the chains. Whatever it is. Like last year was just clunky at times for Penn State. This year, I don't expect that to happen, and I expect that to start in week 1, even on the road at West Virginia. I look at Penn State's front 7 and how talented they are on the defensive line and at the linebacker spot and what they can do against the strength of this West Virginia team, which is running the football. And I think, that matchup, unfortunately, doesn't quite bode well for West Virginia because last year went in the Big 12, and they kind of imposed their will at times on teams. I don't quite see them being able to push around Penn State this year.
I mean, Penn State definitely had the best run defense in the country last year, but also I don't think their schedule was all that strong aside from, maybe the top 2 teams in the country and against Michigan. How many times did Michigan throw the ball in the second half against Penn State? Like 1 time?
It was pass interference.
Oh, yeah, it was pass interference. So I don't know. I feel weird about this game. Look, we talk about top 10 teams going on the road week 1. I mean, Florida State technically wasn't on the road, but you're looking at 2 games. Notre Dame or Penn State. One of these 2 teams, history says, is going to fall. I don't think Penn State falls, but I do think West Virginia covers. Christopher, what would you say is the weakness, I guess, of this Penn State defense?
You're probably staring at that secondary, more specifically that cornerback room. I'm seeing a lot of new faces there. Not that they're not talented. They are really, really talented. Yep. I mean, obviously, you got the 5-star AJ Harris coming up with a high upside from Georgia. Jalen Kimber played a lot of football there for Florida and is a pretty solid guy there, but it's also in a new defense, right? Implementing a new scheme with new faces there in that cornerback room. Obviously, Cam Miller's there too. They like him, but it's also unproven guys in this system in the Big Ten, right? Obviously, the talent is there. We'll see how it gels in week 1. It's a lot to ask from guys, but also, I mean, yes, we like Garrett Green, and is his strength going to be able to push the ball down the field consistently, and especially with his group of wide receivers? I mean, Traylon Ray, yeah, he was pretty solid. Rodney Gallagher can do some things, but Justin Robinson, Jaden Bray, those guys are going to really take big steps to be able to exploit this, quote unquote weakness of Penn State. I don't quite see it. That's what I think the difference is with Michigan last year running the football is they could actually push the ball down the field, and they showed the ability to do that in the first half, or at least the threat to do that with J.J. McCarthy and with some of the talented, not only tight ends, but also receivers as well. I don't quite see the same threat, and it's almost going to look like what Georgia Tech did, right, in week 0, where they just kind of loaded the box and we're just going to stop the run, and it doesn't matter if you bet us deep because we don't expect you to do that consistently and be able to actually push the ball down the field. Yeah, Drew, anything we missed here? How we feel? Anything?
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. I don't see West Virginia able to exploit the one area of weakness that they possibly could. I mean, y'all tell me better than I would know. Does West Virginia have the weapons to do that? And it sounds like they don't. It sounds like they don't have the receivers. It sounds like Green's not that high end down the field passer. It's not there. But I am with West Virginia covering, just not winning. Yeah, man, you got to be able to exploit your weaknesses and get what's taken. And we'll talk about that with the A&M Notre Dame game. There's a glaring weakness on Notre Dame, and we feel like A&M can exploit it to bring it back to my school. And that's a big difference in a game. And if you're not able to take what's given, it's going to be hard to win, get a high profile upset, not be able to do that.
What I'm saying is West Virginia was adept at making explosive plays last year. A lot of times those are in the run game. So I understand the
Jaheim White. It was just Jaheim White.
It was and Garrett Green. Yeah. And Garrett Green. See, did you take Penn State to cover?
Yeah, I'll lay the 8.5, or what is it, 9?
8.5.
Yeah, nice. Give me that.
Well, let's head over to Las Vegas then, where LSU squares off with USC, 2 teams with brand new defensive coordinators because their defenses stunk and let down their Heisman winning quarterbacks. How beautiful is college football, right? I mean, like, just you get 2 teams with former Heisman winning quarterbacks whose defenses stink, and they have a brand new. They lose those 2 quarterbacks. They get a brand new defensive coordinator, and they're playing each other on a neutral site. I think college football is it's romantic sometimes, the way it plays out, these storylines.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting. You mentioned the neutral side. Real quick on that. It's gonna be in Vegas, obviously at the Raiders Stadium. I wonder how much travel is going to be there from LSU fans. Obviously, you guys would know better than me in terms of how they do in road environments. I've heard they're pretty, fun fans, obviously, on the road. But also USC, I mean, a lot has been made of their home atmosphere pretty recently. And we'll see if those guys can travel and what kind of, quote unquote home field advantage. Yes, it's going to be in their time zone or just obviously on the West Coast there, not too far of a plane ride from LA to Las Vegas. But is the atmosphere going to be, a true neutral site, or is it going to be some kind of home field advantage for USC?
Yeah, over under 70% filled stadium. I mean, come on, they might not travel at all to this game. And if they do fill it up, it's going to be a bunch of people in Vegas, getting bets on the game. So, I'm not super high on LSU this year. I don't think they're going to be a bad team. I think they're right at that over under. I think they're going to win 8-9 games, something like that this year. I mean, you lose a lot of amazing weapons, historic weapons on offense in Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Jaden Daniels, but you bring back the O-line. That's a stabilizing force. You have a good quarterback. I mean, you're happy about that. LSU, they breed wide receivers. It's just how it works there. You're going to see a more balanced offensive attack at LSU, but it's going to take a step back. It just is. It's not going to be as good as last year. There's no way it's as good as last year. I don't think that's a hot take. How much better can the defense be in 1 year under a new staff? I mean, we just saw it can be a big leap looking at Georgia Tech, like you were just saying, Matt, but I don't think we're getting an upper end LSU team this year, but I also don't think that USC is, winning a conference or anything this year too. How much is losing Alex Grinch worth? Is that going to help you a lot? Cause it seems like it's not been the best track record in recent history. I mean, it's a full reset for both teams defensively, and it's going to be a shootout, and I might have a play on that. We'll talk about that later.
Look, I have my thoughts on like the actual firing of Matt House there. I don't know that. I think it was a bigger roster problem than it was a coaching problem at LSU. At USC, it was not a talent problem. It was indefinite. Like, there's no doubt that it was an absolute coaching malpractice, and you saw it at Oklahoma too. Like, it's not like any of those Oklahoma teams had significant defenses either, despite having also pretty good talent as well. So, like, in my opinion, you get 2 new defensive coordinators that you think are going to get better or make these teams better. I happen to think that the hiring of D'Anton Lynn, despite Blake Baker's contract being a lot bigger, I think the hiring of D'Anton Lynn is a bigger upgrade over Alex Grinch than Blake Baker is a hire over Matt House.
Interesting.
That's my thoughts. Do you share the same thoughts?
I'm kind of with you there. I'm more of a wait and see approach. I think there's going to be, I literally could not tell you what's going to happen defensively. And obviously those two sides of the football are going to play huge roles because these teams play, pretty tough schedules, especially USC. I'm looking at LSU. I'm looking at on the road Michigan. I'm looking at Penn State, Notre Dame to end the year, and Nebraska's in there too, just for shiggles, right? So I can't believe I just said shiggles. I'm sorry, guys. Shits and giggles.
I'm adding that to my dictionary.
Yeah, but I think to me that you're gonna have to see those guys click in week 1 because you mentioned, yes, obviously you lose the talent there at quarterback and at wide receiver, but you mentioned how good that offensive line is. There's still talent in that wide receiver room somehow. And also, by the way, Garrett Nussmeier has been the talk of SEC backup quarterbacks for 3 years now. It seems like everyone loves that kid. Nick Saban brought him up on game day just recently. Yeah, I cannot believe how similar these programs are. A lot's been made of that, right? But it's pretty exciting and what they're going to do. LSU's favored by 4.5. I don't really know how Vegas gets that number because, and I'm not telling you it's bad, good or bad.
It opened at 6. It opened at 6.5.
Okay, yeah, I still like USC even if it's down to 4.5. I'll go USC to win and to cover. I think this Miller Moss kid is really good. I think the weapons that USC has is going to absolutely exploit a still pretty lackluster defensive back room, I think, at LSU. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, man. I mean, Deuce Chestnut is back at Syracuse playing safety. He did change his position. I mean, is Jair Brown the guy? Is Ashton Stamps? I mean, I saw him kind of get picked apart at times by Wisconsin in that bowl game. I don't know if I see it. LSU, yes, Blake Baker comes in, and I'm expecting to jump. But the thing is, you mentioned it. The talent at USC is there. It's just got to be kind of quick fix on the coaching staff. Not quick fix, but, a fix of the coaching staff. And it sounds like it's happened. The talent still needs to be addressed, but they didn't bring in a ton of talent on the portal. So that's what it's like. What are they seeing that we're not seeing? Obviously, Perk is there. What's he going to do this year? Is he going to be an off-ball guy? It sounds like he's going to be doing that, which I don't know is the best thing for that defense, but I guess maybe the best thing for him. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a really exciting game. I cannot wait to watch that. Sunday night standalone. We'll have our hangover after a crazy Saturday. We'll get up. Bye. We'll figure out what we can do Sunday morning and then get ready for this game Sunday night, the prime time. Last year's, it was LSU and Florida State, I believe, and that was LSU kind of got handed to by Florida State, and obviously I don't
in
expect
the second
obviously
half. Yeah.
much different team, much different scenario, but it's just interesting. It's just interesting.
Has LSU found a second defensive tackle, or do they have a defensive tackle rotation? I mean, what's going on
It's
inside
not looking
there?
like Mason Smith and Makai Wingo. I'll tell you that.
Man.
And they had Jefferson too.
Yeah. Ooh, gone.
Who I know wasn't great, but he was still there, and he was an NFL body. Don McKinley, I want to see him play. I don't know if he's gonna.
He will.
It sounds like there's optimism in week one. Oh man, but
Like,
Jalen Lee is nothing special. Gio Paez was, an Big Ten defender in the interior there. That's a great point you bring up there, Drew. I don't see it, but again, like they didn't go after a ton of transfers, or maybe they didn't. They did, but they didn't land
missed.
them.
They missed. Brian Kelly said that they
tried. They didn't want to pay. They didn't want to pay.
They didn't want to pay.
They're not into paying players.
And they're not paying apparently, which
Yeah.
I mean, we know that's not entirely true, but isn't that why he went to LSU, right? So he could have more resources. I don't know. That was what I heard.
I mean, Marcus Freeman's recruiting pretty well, but
yeah, exactly. Give me USC to win and cover. I think these are two very similar teams. I'll take the points. Also, USC's offensive line, we've talked about it in the preseason, CD. It's good. It is really good. Like, I think this team is going to be able to run the ball more effectively than they were able to last year. And a lot of that was game script, that they couldn't run the ball, right? Because they're trying to score points. And you have Caleb Williams, right? Why would you take the ball out of his hands too? I think Miller Moss is good. I think his receivers are good. I think the talent is there on that defense. If Dan Lynn can somehow figure out how to help him tackle, like Tyler Santucci, help that Georgia Tech team tackle, like this USC defense could be really good. And I think that's why we both were kind of on the over. I don't think it was a bet for either of us necessarily, but like over 7.5 feels like pretty decent for USC. I really like them here. And this is not the last time that we'll see USC +4.
Give me your feeling on this wide receiver room behind Kyron Lacey.
Oh, and LSU. So CJ Daniels is good, right? Like we know what we saw at Liberty, right? And wide receiver, I feel like from the lower levels, transferring to Power 5 has a lot higher success rate than other positions transferring over from G5 to P5, right? I mean, we've seen like Trey Harris transfer to Ole Miss be awesome. We've seen Jamari Thrash transfer from Georgia State to Louisville, and he was awesome. Like there's been plenty of examples of lower level guys transfer up to Power 5 and be very successful. I would say Chris Hilton, is he battling injuries right now? I don't know what that's looking like. I think it was looking like he was going to play, but I'm not sure. But then after that, Xavier Thomas from Mississippi State is a good football player. I don't know if he's going to play in the slot or if that's going to be Aaron Anderson, the former 5-star from Alabama. Like the talent is there in the receiver room.
Yeah.
It just a lot of unproven stuff. I think CJ Daniels is proven. I think Kyron Lacey, we've seen enough. I think those top two guys are really good. I think Chris Hilton, you've kind of just been waiting on, right? Is Sheldon Sampson ready? I don't know. I don't know that he is.
I'll give you another kid from that 2023 class, Kyle Parker. He ran 10.8, 900. Sounds like when Hilton went down, he kind of stepped in to that starting role, and he could be a difference maker down the football field for them. Garrett Nussmeyer's a gunslinger, right? He loves to push the ball down the field. But yeah, obviously with Hilton out, I think there are question marks about consistency because he had his consistency problem. So what does that say about the guys below him, right?
Drew, give us your picks.
Man, this is coming out of the wire for me. It's going to be a shootout. And if we're going shootout, high-scoring affair, I'm going Lincoln Riley. We have agreement on this one.
Wow, a lock. So you're taking USC to win and cover.
Yes, I am. Yep.
All right.
That came down to the last one where y'all talked me into it. I was leaning it, but I was going to go with the offensive line of LSU to stabilize. No, give me you confirmed it when you told me you showed me your confidence in the USC offensive line. I'm going USC winning, covering. Give it to me.
Can I ask you guys real quick? So a lot has been made of that green dot, right? The helmet communicator for the quarterbacks and linebackers. Does that help a new defense in the defensive scheme? Does it help those guys? Because we saw Mason Cobb struggled last year for USC. Like, do you think that's going to be an advantage for, I guess, both of these teams, obviously, but for them trying to implement their scheme in week 1, week 2, week 3 in September?
I think it, in general, actually gives an advantage to a defense. One, I think we saw, like, I don't think Haynes King going like this. Like, I think all you got to do is just turn up the gain in the microphones in the helmet that allow people to hear, even if the stadium is really loud. But I think, in general, I think it helps the defense better because Nick Saban defenses were awesome at this, right? Like, if the offense audible to get a good look, right? Having linebackers that were there ready to know exactly what to switch into and give a different look at the last second was kind of a big deal. I think now obviously the helmet communications don't go all the way down to play clock's 0, right? Like I think it's like cuts off at like 15 seconds or something like that. But I think just giving that extra boost, that extra look to your linebackers, just giving yourself a chance to get set up because as as bad as it is for an offense to not get set up, like it's 10 times worse if your defense is in the wrong position. It's 10 times worse if you're off than if your offense is in the wrong position, right? So I am a firm believer that it actually helps the defenses better. And I will be testing this theory by maybe taking some unders on some of these plays later. So, but that's my thoughts. So do you have similar thoughts on that, Drew, or do you think it's kind
Yeah.
of a wash?
Well, I think in this game it's a wash because I think it's gonna obviously disproportionately help teams that are in new playbooks and new schemes. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
obviously going to help those the most. And you're looking at that on both defenses here. I think it's a wash in this game, but I think it'll help catch some teams up, catch that communication up, increase that processing speed in the new system for some teams. It's going to help A&M a lot. So yeah, I think it's a wash in this game, but I think it's going to help a lot of teams in similar scenarios.
Let's head over to Stanford versus TCU, a game that, maybe you didn't think that we were going to bring you this game. Well, we are. All right. We got a TCU team that has so many new pieces and a Stanford team with, look, one of CD and I's favorite coaches in all of college football, Troy Taylor, over there at Stanford, just making sneaky stuff happen left and right. So it's going to be really interesting. I think this game's going to be played in California. The spread is 9.5 that we're going to be picking at on this show. I'm ready to say, see, I kind of like this TCU team. I think better than a lot of other people like this team. But also, you're going on the road to California against a Stanford team that's offensively very dangerous. And you have a TCU team that struggled defensively last year, but I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I'm just going to go ahead and right away and say, I think I'm going to take TCU minus 9.5, but I don't feel good about it at all. I don't feel good about it at all. I mean, look, they struggled defensively last year, but you bring in Andy Avalos there as a new defensive coordinator because Gillespie there, I guess what wasn't getting done for you, right? I mean, you had a lot of talent there on the national championship team, but it wasn't the defense that got you there, or the national championship appearing team, right? I just think Stanford. Look, it's hard to bring in a ton of talent in the transfer portal when you're a team like Stanford and you're a private school. But I do think that this team is going to be better than it was last year. Absolutely. And I think another year, that system, another year, those guys, are you going to have a new quarterback? I mean, I thought Ashton Daniels was pretty good for you last year. Regardless, even if you're going to bring in, a true freshman that's absolutely lighting up camp and all that stuff. But I'm gonna take TCU minus 9.5, and I'm not gonna think about it that much more. I think there's a lot of uncertainty for me about this TCU team, but I think maybe plugging in Andy Avalos could do some things for this defense to give them enough stops to let Josh Hoover work this offense, because I think this offense has a chance to be okay.
All right. Well, I'm going to need y'all to talk me out of this one because I feel like TCU's on upset alert. All right. You got to talk me out of
You're
this.
not crazy.
You know
Go
more
for
than
it.
I do about these two teams, but here's what I see. So Stanford, what do they bring back? I think they bring back receivers that they're excited about, right? I think that's
Absolutely.
something that they have. Now, talk to me about this quarterback situation. It's true freshman. Is that what's happening?
Well, no, it's going to be Ashton
It'll be Ashton
Daniels,
Daniels.
Okay.
who played last year, who was really
Yeah.
good for them actually last year. But
And
there's, I don't know.
and Elijah Brown has looked good. So it's not that Daniels is there by default. Brown has actually looked good too. So it's a
Okay.
good thing for
So
Stanford.
he's winning the battle. Okay. So you're talking up this defense under Andy Avalos, going to be improved. But from what I understand, this is somewhat of a rebuild in the secondary, right?
Oh yeah, it's a rebuild in a lot of spots, I feel like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with
Yeah.
you, dude. I'm with
So
you.
I look at TCU heading to the West Coast to play an Atlantic Coast team. Really weird situation. First time we can say that. I mean, this is like a Thursday night game, right? It's one of the first times it's going to happen. Really weird, late game environment. I'm going to take the home underdog in this game. I'm going to say Stanford can exploit that weakness on TCU. Now, You got to talk to me on this Stanford defense. I mean, what they have their secondary back, linebackers back, young defensive line. That's what I have in my notes. TCU offense, year two bump under Kendall Briles, maybe. I mean, talk to me about this TCU offense and talk to me about the Stanford defense because right now I'm thinking that Stanford can get it done. I need
Listen,
help here.
I will not talk you out of that. I am gonna go Stanford to cover, but I will take TCU to win because I did take their
Okay,
over 7.5. So I would like to see the middle there.
you
I
got to get
also
this
took,
one.
yeah, I also took Stanford's over as well. So I feel pretty good about both these teams. But I do think there's a reason this line's under 10. I think it's I don't know, man. I think the matchups you mentioned that with what Troy Taylor can exploit offensively, especially pushing the ball down the field, maybe breaking in a new secondary for TCU, and also you're gonna miss Dominique Williams too. Dominique is going to Oklahoma, really good defensive lineman for you. But on offense for TCU, man, I mean, Josh Hoover was kind of up and down last year. And yes, he is the QB of the future there. It's not Ken Seals. Whatever that momentum was early in the season, it's not Ken Seals. Hoover's there. And listen, he's a talented kid. But again, yes, the bright spots were there. But consistency going on the road, week one, how is it going to be? I do like the wide receiver core, especially at the top end with Williams and Eric McAllister, who comes over from Andy Avalos, obviously different side of the football, but Andy Avalos was his head coach at Boise State. He was really, really good 50-50 ball guy. Williams is a star in the Big 10 or the Big 12, excuse me. Cam Cook was pretty good, and they like him in the spring. Trey Sanders is solid at running back as well. But the offensive line, a lot of transfers, and it's going to
A
be
lot of
mix and
them.
matching. And in week one, that's tough to bank on the road as well. Obviously, there's a lot of experience here with some lower level players, San Diego State, Louisiana Tech, right? Even Florida State with Bless Harris, but we'll see. We will see. Obviously, TCU, I think I feel pretty good about them bouncing back and winning more than 5 games last year, obviously. But I do think this could be a spot where they get tripped up on. Absolutely. And I just like the momentum Stanford has. I like what they're doing recruiting off the field, and they bring back all 5 offensive linemen, right? I feel pretty good about what they can do offensively. And then defensively, you got some guys. Sinclair's a stud, right? Bernadette's back to pair with him at the linebacker spot. Colin Wright's a legit, I think, NFL kind of body there. He can play inside or out in the secondary. It could be a fun game. It's a Friday night game too. It'll be late
Friday
night,
night.
9:30. It's ESPN. It's awesome for late night. Pac-12. It's gone, but this is just as good, man. This is just as good.
I live for these games, man. This is what I want to be watching in bed with like a bag of
Yep.
candy next to me and a beer. This is what I want to do.
Yeah, all I would say, Stanford, this defense was probably the worst Power Five defense last year, specifically in the secondary. So that's why I feel like this game, like the getting the double digits for TCU isn't crazy, but like also I totally understand what y'all are saying. Like the over and win total or the over for this game is 59.5, and I thought about taking the over. And if it gets to a shootout, like Stanford is no stranger to winning shootouts. Even last year in some close games, like they're no stranger to giving teams problems in shootouts and scoring the ball and having that unique Troy Taylor offense that just absolutely obliterated people when he was at Sacramento State. So yeah, I'm on 9.5, but I don't love it. I don't love it. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. All right, I'm gonna leave it at that. Let's move over. Oh, you got one more
Real
point?
quick, I had to throw this in, right? Sorry, TCU fans, but last year, right, road opener, shootout game, Colorado, they lost last year, and that kind of set them on a ball rolling downhill. Obviously, injuries happened as well, but
Chandler Morris.
yeah, don't tell North Texas that they like Chandler Morris.
I
We like
love
Chandler
Chandler
Morris.
Morris. I love Chandler. Well, I love Chandler Morris on North Texas. See, so
Yeah, come on. But anyways,
uh,
I think it's interesting. I mean, we'll see. We will see. And by the way, this will be it could be 3 straight years of it's. I don't know. But never mind. That's going nowhere. But I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting.
I'm
all
way more
interesting.
excited for this one now. I can't wait. I'll be in College Station watching this one in the Airbnb. This is exciting.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna try to find some prize picks angles to this game for sure. Just because I feel like the offense potential is maximized in this game versus some other games that we're gonna be talking about.
Can't wait.
Speaking of offensive games, just kidding. Arizona State versus Wyoming. All right, here we go. Two teams that ranked in the bottom third of college football in total offense. But two teams that were pretty frisky on defense, particularly in the run games. And I think those are two angles, right? When we look at Wyoming teams in the past, right? Look, even Josh Allen had tough time throwing the ball in those wins in Laramie, right? You're looking at two teams that are probably going to be adept to running the ball pretty effectively in their own right here. And I think the under's an interesting play, but the line's here, Arizona State -6.5. You got Jay Salville, his first year at Wyoming, and this was a hire that CD and I were a little bit critical of. But here's what I'll say. Wyoming is a very different program from most programs in college football, and I think continuity matters. Okay, I think it matters. And Craig Bull hand-selected Jay Salville, so there's stuff to be said about that. Okay, you don't have Andrew Peasley at quarterback anymore, who doing stuff in the NFL right now in the preseason, from what I saw. But you lose Harrison Whaley as well at running back, who was your 1,000-yard stud rusher. So
Tough injury.
Tough injury. I think he's not out for the season, but he'll be back at some point. But I find it hard, and I don't hate this offensive line for Wyoming either, but I find it hard to find an angle where this Wyoming team puts up points. But also Arizona State's defense is nothing to, sing about either, because, they lose their best defensive player to another team in the Big 12. I don't think that defense is going to be great either, but they did play tough. They did play very, very tough. I thought that, what's his name? Brian Ward, defense coordinator for Arizona State. I thought he did a fantastic job last year. And I anticipate, that defense getting a little frisky again as well this year. So I know this is a game that not everyone's excited about, but I think this is a very interesting game for Arizona State. And I also think that we've seen the Mountain West look pretty decent, at least in the bottom half of the Mountain West. And I anticipate, I don't know about you, CD, I don't know about you, Drew, but I anticipate the Mountain West overtaking the American Conference this year in terms of being that second best G5 conference, because on this show, we believe that the Sun Belt is the best G5 conference. But look, I don't know. Hot take, guys. Hot takes.
I'll go first because I don't have a strong feel in this game, but I will say this is why you come to the Redshirt Sophomore podcast. You think we're just talking Miami, Florida. You think we're just talking A&M, Notre Dame. No, we're talking Wyoming, Arizona State, but we're talking Cam Scattaboo, one of my favorite players in the country, one of the most amazing do-it-all individuals I saw last year. I had a lot of fun watching some late nights. I missed out on him in fantasy this year. Very disappointed by that. I did have Jared Conyers last year. Player I was high on, but unfortunately he's gone now. I think Texas Tech. Y'all probably tell me that.
Yep.
Kenny Dillingham's doing the Lord's work, picking up the mess that Herm Edwards left behind at Arizona State. It's a tough team. They won 3 games last year, but I enjoyed every time I watched them. Every time I watched this team, I got some enjoyment out of it. Why did they add 5 D-line transfers? They added 5 guys to the D-line. They needed it that bad?
They needed that bad. Their best defensive line transferred out of there, and then they needed it pretty bad. So, but that's also how you can tell that they needed it, is that the fact that they brought in 5 defensive line transfers. So
I'm familiar.
That's a very good point.
I'm familiar with that situation. Yeah. And look, a little bit of research. I saw that their linebacker depth should be pretty nice thanks to injuries last year. Always a blessing in disguise with injuries when you have a position group get hit. Sometimes if there's players coming back the next year, you get a little depth bump. So I know nothing about Wyoming. I'm just going to tell you that this defense at Wyoming, that was, that was the impressive aspect of their team. They had a strong defense. What are they bringing back on this defense?
Well, first of all, when I look at Wyoming, okay, their defense, their numbers, okay, as always, are pretty skewed because they play in Laramie. So it looks like they have a really good pass defense a lot of the times, okay? But there are 20-mile-per-hour crosswinds in every single game that's played in Laramie. So what you do have to look, though, is their run defense in their front seven, which, you bring back 2 guys on that defensive line that have more snaps than, probably anyone else on this football team. So, I mean, you have to feel good about, some of these positions on the defensive side of the ball. I don't feel great about their secondary, but traditionally Wyoming doesn't need to have a good secondary because they're playing Laramie, but they're not playing in Laramie this game.
Right.
They're playing in Arizona State. So I think that is important. You're breaking in a new quarterback, Sam Leavitt. Is he that good? I don't know. He couldn't start I know he's younger than Caden Hauser and what's his face over there at Michigan State last year as
Kim,
well.
Noah Kim.
No, Kim. Oh God, his spring game last year was horrible. I remember that. I remember watching that nightmare. But
Taking the under.
yeah, taking the under in Michigan State was the easiest thing of my entire life. But yeah, I think the front seven, I think they feel pretty okay about. But I don't know. But it's a question, Drew. I think more of like, can Arizona State push the ball down the field? Like Elijah Badger, the number one receiver last year, transferred away over to Florida. Raleek Brown, okay, was a guy that they brought in from USC with a really high running back, wide receiver, kind of mixed slot guy, whatever. He's hurt. I don't think he's going to play in week 1. So there are some interesting angles to this, which is why I think this is a very tough game to pick, which is why I wanted to put it on this list.
Yeah,
So,
I can't. Sorry, I
Scared
couldn't
me there.
believe. I couldn't believe that it was 6.5. To be honest, and listen,
I believe it.
it's in Arizona State. That means a neutral site. You're looking at like 3.5, 4
Yeah,
point difference,
yeah.
and that's where I just don't see it. I really don't see it. Listen, Wyoming, I have my thoughts right on Salvo, but I mean, you bring back Sabota, right? Or you bring in Sabota, right? Obviously, coming, he's got solid legs, and I think what they can do is exploit. You mentioned those 5 defensive linemen. How are those guys going to gel in week 1? In week 1, and how can they take advantage of that? You bring back a lot of your offensive linemen. You've got Nick Miles that's hoping to be a good blocker for you on that tight end room. Harrison, that killed me. That, to me, that's what set me on the edge here. It's like he's a difference maker for that team offensively, especially if you're struggling to push the ball down the field. What he can do, extending drives, keeping you ahead of the chains. That's real, real important for this Wyoming offense, especially, what they're going to be able to try to do establishing the run. I'm going to go Arizona State -6.5 to cover and to
Me
win.
too.
I might put this somewhere. We'll have to see. I do hate betting on a young guy. I don't know much about Sam Levitt in terms of what he's done at the college level. Obviously, in practice, he beat out Jaden Rashad, took care of the football, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Arizona State, I want to see them impose their will. I want to see that offensive line take some steps. I want to see that running back room get utilized really, really. I want to see maybe Jeff Sims sighting here or there for that quarterback room.
No, you
I
don't.
don't think it with the
Maybe third and short, where like he's not handing the football to anyone else. It's just in his hands.
Come on, if it's Arizona State and you're over until it's 4.5 and you're trying to make a bowl game this year, this is a game you have to win and look good because you got Mississippi State coming in next week. And then you got on the road at Texas State, and then you start conference play where you're going to be maybe a dog potentially in all those football games. So we'll see. We'll see. But this is a must-win game, obviously, for Dillingham. You mentioned what he's doing, the Lord's work, as you put it, fantastically with Arizona State. But listen, there's optimism there, I think, long-term. But you have to start seeing results, I think, especially in these kinds of games. You can't go, 21-20 or whatever it was last year against Southern Utah. You can't.
Which, by
that
the
can't
way,
happen this year.
Rain delay. I was up watching that game at like 4 a.m. That's how late that game went. That was crazy.
Sicko. But
awesome.
To me, you can't have that. I need you to establish your will. That's why I'm picking Arizona State to cover.
I'll keep it boring and go in agreement with y'all. And if A&M wins, I'm up late watching this game all night. I can't wait. I'm in the hotel bedroom again.
Yeah.
If not, I'm sleeping. But if we win, I'm up watching this one.
We're hitting Northgate, Drew. We're hitting Northgate.
Oh, I know. We're going Northgate first, and I'll catch second half in the hotel room.
Alrighty. Well, speaking of Texas A&M, look, Drew, I know this is why you get up in the morning. All right. And we're happy to have you on the show for your analysis of the Texas A&M versus Notre Dame football game, where the line is A&M -3 in most places. Look, on the show a while back, or on Twitter, on a show a while back, we told you about taking that +1, but then on Twitter, we also put out, hey, get it at -1 before it moves. And what do you know? Charles Jagsaw gets hurt. Well, this is after Charles Jagsaw got hurt at left tackle. The line moved significantly. Drew, I know I watched your prediction for the Notre Dame game, so I already know what you're going to say. So I'm not going to spoil anything, but give it to us, man. What do we like about these teams?
All right, so obviously you got to look at the one matchup that A&M's looking to exploit. It starts with the defensive line of A&M going up against a very raw and untested Notre Dame offensive line. That's the one major discrepancy in this game, in my opinion, that where you look at two position groups and you say, okay, this team can exploit that totally. However, if you talk to Notre Dame fans and you look at their defense, that defense could shut A&M's offense down. There's a world where that happens. So if you're going to pick A&M in this game, you're banking on Connor Wegman going back to form in game one under a new staff. You're banking on an offensive line who hasn't shown that they've played at like that average to above average level in 2 years. You're banking on a receiver room that lost its two top dogs. You're banking on a lot to come true. But you're also very happy with the fact they have a totally new offensive scheme, a new coaching staff. Things got stale. Things were bad under the previous staff. It's a year one, but you're still looking at it as a potential net positive for A&M, just given a better offensive scheme with a more diverse running attack under Colin Klein, getting a more of a gap block heavy scheme, running at some of these Notre Dame monsters on the defensive line. It's all around improvement you're kind of banking on for A&M's offense if A&M is going to outscore Notre Dame. Now, here's the thing. I'm not fully sold on Notre Dame's offense overall. I'm not fully sold on Riley Leonard. I'm not fully sold on this entire receiver group. I know they have a couple guys, but I'm not sure that they're going to be able to score on A&M's defense. So I think you could say that exact same dialogue. You could copy paste that from Notre Dame. So that being said, this is an underplay, and it's moved down like 2.5 points, 3 points. It was what started at 49 is where it opened. Is that what it was? Something like that?
And I did not jump on it, unfortunately.
No.
Right now you're looking at 46.5. No, it opened at 50.5, Drew.
Oh my
That's what
goodness.
it opened as. It's been.
What were we doing? What were we doing?
I was caught sleeping, Drew.
Me too, man.
It's crossed like three. It's crossed like three key numbers, or two.
And I'm still favoring the under right now. Not to get into spoilers, but I'm still favoring the under in this game. And if you've seen my video, you know I have A&M winning this. I actually have them winning by 10 or 11. I have a big win. I have 28-17 Texas A&M. And I think that's by way of this A&M defensive line creating enough havoc to create at least one scoring opportunity for the offense or scoring themselves. I'm not sold on the Notre Dame offense overall yet. I know they brought in Mike Denbrock. I know they feel really good about that. But can they do the Mike Denbrock thing? Can they go one tight end the whole game against this defensive line? Do they need to bring in tight end help off the bench? Do they have to slow down? Can they air it out against this defensive line? I don't know. I don't know if they can. I mean, the best offensive coordinators will adapt, but that's not what we've seen from Denbrock the last few years. So I don't know if they can play to their strengths. I think A&M takes them out of their game, and I think the defense gives A&M an extra bump, and A&M covers and wins.
Wow.
That's stuff I love to hear, Drew.
Thank you. Listen, I as the A&M outsider here, to me, I look at because I kind of like A&M in the passing defense, right? Because I love their pass rushers. I love what their matchup. Obviously, the offensive line, like you talked about, and I like their secondary. You guys did a whole video on that. I encourage you to check that out because there's a lot of pieces you can move around, even though it's going to be in a new system and new faces and new uniform for a lot of these guys coming in and transfer. But there's so much talent there, different bodies, what you can do. To me, I worry about if I see a path to victory for Notre Dame here, it's going to be running the football. Not only with Jeremiah Love, but also Riley Leonard, what he can do, adding that extra dimension when he is healthy. We saw him break Clemson at times in week 1 last year, and that was a really talented front there for Clemson. My question here for A&M, and I want you guys to answer it and answer honestly, I guess, do you feel good about what they can do early down, up the middle in terms of, obviously, you get the third down, you feel really good about unleashing Scorton, Stewart, Turner, all those guys to rush the passer, but up the middle, not only at that linebacker 2 spot, but also in that interior defensive line. Is that something I should be worried about here? Is there an advantage for Notre Dame?
It's not like Notre Dame has a significant offensive line advantage. I think there's a question about who is going to play that one tech. I mean, A&M, there was a depth chart that was like today, and there's like oars at like, basically every position that we were already previously asking a question about. Like, I still think there's a question like, is Albert Regis going to be a guy that steps up and, plug up holes in that one tech? Is DJ Hicks going to actually play one tech? Like, I don't know. I don't know the answer to those things. I do think you have a really good athletic set of linebackers opposite Torian York. I do think they're not as good as Ezra and Cooper, but I do think that they can impact the run game, But also, too, those edge rushers, Well, Shamar Turner, first of all, is a good run defender, but he'll be playing 3 tech likely, unless he plays 1 tech. I don't know. I don't know what that interior is going to look like. Um, it- I'm confident that they can do enough to stop the run, if that makes sense. I don't think Notre Dame's offensive line, even their interior offensive line, has a significant advantage over A&M's interior defensive line. And I'm sure, Drew, you may agree, have other counterpoints.
No, I agree that is actually a question. That's a question mark on the team. I think the most significant loss on the team is McKinley Jackson to the NFL because you don't
Yes.
fill it 1-for-1. I mean, you don't really replace Edger and Cooper, but you feel good about that room and the depth behind whoever starts. You don't replace McKinley Jackson. Yeah, you throw an Albert Regis in there. He's been praised by coaches since spring. But I don't, like you're saying, I don't think that A&M might pay for that at some point in the year. But I don't think Notre Dame is the offensive line to make them pay for that, especially when you have a guy like Torian York manning the gaps in the middle of that defense. I just think that's not the O-line to do it. Maybe you'll see glimpses of it. Maybe it comes into play every now and then, but I don't see that as a glaring mismatch or a hole. What I do worry about is Howard Cross on one-on-one scenarios. If he gets on a one-on-one situation versus a Naboo or a Fayu, he might have the quickness over those two guys. I mean, he didn't have the quickness over a lot of interior offensive linemen, but, unproven guys, that one-on-one is something to look out for on the other side of the ball. I don't know why I just switched to the other side of the ball there. It's getting late, but yeah, I don't think this is the D line, the offensive line to make them pay in that area.
Yeah, I'm also think like running a gap scheme benefits Le'Veon Moss a ton, right? Because like in a zone scheme, right, you're moving that offensive line and you're asking a running back to make, lateral decisions very quickly, right? Whereas Le'Veon Moss is his most effective when first of all, they ran more gaps. Like Jimbo was not like he didn't neglect this fact. He ran more gap scheme with Le'Veon Moss than he did with Ruben Owens by significant. It was like
Correct.
15% more, like significantly more, because Le'Veon Moss is better downhill, and that's what Colin Klein does. Like 60-70% of the time, is he's going to actually have a hole that's going to open up for Le'Veon Moss, and it's like, okay, that is the hole that you are going to run through, and you're going to run down at 18 miles per hour with these linebackers who, by the way, we like Jack Kaiser. He's a good football player, but maybe some other inexperience in the linebacker room, and I think it could be an interesting situation where if you find ways to get leverage on Howard Cross in those gap schemes, right, rather than try to overpower them or de-anchor them, him and Riley Mills, I think there's a chance that A&M could run the ball with Le'Veon Moss, and I don't think people are thinking about it. So
yeah, I think size-wise, the A&M offensive line matches up great against their lighter, quicker defensive line if you scheme it right. And yeah, you mentioned the linebacker room at Notre Dame. I think that linebacker room represents both their ceiling and floor of their defense, right? Yeah. It's going to make or break that defense. I mean, not make or break. It's going to be a top 10 at worst defense, most likely, given the schedule and everything they bring back. But, that linebacker group is going to determine their success in their biggest games, I think.
Yeah, and the secondary is really good, but Benjamin Morris coming off a shoulder injury. You're relying on 2 transfers, Rod Hurd and Jordan Clark, who you believe are really good football players, but I like their secondary, but I'm not ready to admit that it's. I don't know. I think it's going to be really good. I think it's going to be really good. It's not an advantage for A&M's wide receivers, that's for sure.
I do want to see at least one target to Benjamin Morrison with Noah Thomas. I want to see how it goes down. I want to see can he stop size? Can Benjamin Morris stop elite size with athleticism and catching ability? I mean, I know you're not going to do that play after play. It's not going to be the game plan to throw at Benjamin Morrison, but I'm interested to see it. Elko in his presser today talked about how they feel like they have a wide receiver 1. You can only assume it's Noah Thomas. They're feeling really good about him. It was obvious in spring that they want to give him the most targets, get him in space, hand him the ball off in end arounds, get him involved in RPOs. Not necessarily to expect from what you look at as kind of like a red zone target, just like a big dude. They want to get him the ball in a lot of ways. And I want to see it happen versus the secondary. I want to see it get tested, at least in some capacity.
Yeah, I'll give my pick real quick. I'm going to go A&M to win and obviously to cover as well. I think Wigman is going to have success against this secondary. I love this secondary. We did a whole video talking about best groups of college football back in the spring, and Notre Dame secondary was on the list. And because of those names you mentioned, but I love Wigman and what he can do and Colin Klein's offense and the receivers there. And please, please let me see some Moose Muhammad. Let me see some Moose Muhammad. Release that guy. Let him go. I hope, because I think he could be a difference maker. You mentioned Jordan Clark in the slot there. And listen, he kind of struggled last year at times. Good player. Good player was hurt. But I do think that's where you can find your advantages, because you look at Rod Hurd, you look at Morrison, Watts is there as a ball hawking guy. Like, to me, I'm looking at those third and fourth receivers that you're going to get to, your third and fourth progressions potentially. And that's where you're going to get that. I think the advantage goes to A&M, and that's where you're going to see big time third down conversions, red zones, busted coverages in week one potentially. I do want to ask you guys real quick, who is under more pressure? Who needs to win this game more? Because obviously Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame, has lofty expectations in year 3, but there's a lot of expectations, I think, for Texas A&M, and also just the pressure and I guess more so pass pressure from what Jimbo's shortcomings happened, and I guess more so kind of trying to prove yourself on a national stage for Texas A&M. Obviously, it's week one game. These teams have plenty of opportunities to make up for this loss, and it's going to be obviously a very competitive football game. But who is under more pressure? Who needs this win more? Is it Mike Elko in year 1, or is it Notre Dame in year 3, Marcus Freeman?
Oh man, there's pressure on both sides for sure, but talk to Notre Dame fans. They expect playoff this year. And if they lose to A&M, that changes the whole outlook, because you lose a little bit of confidence. You're not feeling as good. You don't really have the mulligan, because 10-2 is a question mark without a conference championship. Depends on how the rest of the season would shake out. And of course, Notre Dame's going to get that brand bump, but they're on thin ice. And let's say they lose to an A&M in week 1. They run the table, and let's say they fall. Their last game of the year is at USC, right? They lose that game. I mean, that's a bad that's a possible outcome. And that I don't know how that is viewed by the committee at the end of the season. I mean, they're kind of on the fringe right there. And this is year 3 for Marcus Freeman. Things seem to come together in year 3 for coaches at Notre Dame. Historically, they're feeling really, really good this year. And I think they're kind of having a computation error when they look at the line and they see that A&M is the favorite. Doesn't really jive with their expectations. So I would say more pressure on Notre Dame. Of course, it feels really bad for A&M to lose, because you have so much opportunity by winning game 1 this year. I mean, it just sets you off on such a good path under a new staff. It's just more of a opportunity loss for A&M than it is for Notre Dame kind of getting hit off their axis.
Yeah, I'll agree with everything you said right there. And the reason to beat a dead horse, I guess, just they gotta win. Yeah. They gotta win. There's significant pressure over there at Notre Dame. And but it looks like we're all in agreement that Texas A&M's gonna win and cover. So
you're calling it too? Let's go. Let's
go. Come on, guys.
Oh
I mean, I just think Texas A&M matches up well. That's it. That's all.
I think so too. And just a couple more notes. You were mentioning this stuff earlier, Chris. Nickel. What was his name again? I'm sorry, I'm blanking.
Jordan Clark.
Jordan Clark. Is he coming off of injury as well?
So he was hurt. He played hurt last year at Arizona State. I think he should be healthy. It sounds like he's healthy, but he played injured, so he didn't look as good as maybe they thought he was going to be last year for them. And so his PFF grade and everything else didn't look great, but it was more so because he was hurt.
Should be healed up by now. But Howard Cross, coming off an offseason injury, limited participant in camp. Benjamin Morrison, also limited participant in camp. He had to ask, apparently, I think this came out in the Freeman presser today, he had to ask to do tackling drills. They were going to hold him out of every tackling drill, and he had to put himself out there and get himself to do it. That stuff helps A&M. Those are your top players. Those are your stars. That's why Notre Dame is rated as a playoff contender going into the year, players like that. And also with Watts, great player. There's a reason he won the Nagurski last year. But he's a little bit susceptible to getting a little over-aggressive at times. I think maybe Colin Klein can make him pay for that. We'll see what happens.
Let's go over to our underdog platters of the night. Okay. Each of us are going to pick 2 underdog games. The spreads have to be more than 10 points. If it's 9.5, we'll let it slide, because there's a couple of those. I think it's week 1, you really don't know. I got 2 pretty smelly ones, I think. I actually just changed mine up. Actually, while we were recording this, totally missed on one. I don't know how I missed it. But yeah, each of us are going to give 2 underdogs. And look, implied probability of a team winning a game as a 10-point underdog is like less than like 35% of the time. So these might not win. Okay. But these are games that could be on upset alert. Could be on upset alert. I'll go first. I'll give my two, and some of these might overlap. I don't know what y'all have, but Hawaii versus UCLA at home. They're 2 touchdown underdogs. I know Hawaii didn't look amazing or maybe as dominant as you thought they would look against Delaware State, but we talked about this UCLA team not being great. Okay. And also, Hawaii has a game under their belt, and it's not easy to travel to the islands. That's all I'm going to say about that. When I look at a new Division I football team in Kennesaw State going to play the UTSA Roadrunners as 24.5-point underdogs, I look at a team that's, look, they don't know who they're going to play at quarterback, right? Owen McCown, Josh McCown's kid, did not look good in the bowl game last year at all in his limited time. When that team didn't have Frank Harris last year, they lost to Army, a team that likes to run the ball a lot. I think Kennesaw State likes running the ball a little bit. So I don't know that these numbers, I don't know if they have a good way to measure what a team is going to translate from FCS to FBS, like what the power rating should be. They might be a little bit off here. I'm going to take Kennesaw State to upset, or on upset alert, to upset UTSA over there.
Interesting.
Are those crazy?
I love it.
I feel like all are
crazy
going to be
that
pretty crazy.
I like them. Yeah, these have to be crazy. Those are great.
So, CD, what do you got?
Listen, I'm gonna go, and this one's, I guess, a lower line, but man, it's gonna be a fun one to watch. This will be Saturday, obviously, August 31st. South Dakota State going to Stillwater, Oklahoma. South Dakota State, obviously, might not know a ton about them, but we do know they are really, really good at the level of football that they do play. Let's turn the clock back to 2022. They played an Iowa football team. They were really, really close, 7-3. And no, a touchdown was not scored in that game. It was 2 safeties, classic Iowa fashion. Listen, I think South Dakota State, they return 8 all-conference players, obviously headlined by Mark Kowski, the quarterback there, who was the Walter Payton Award winner, which, if you didn't know, is the FCS's version of the Heisman Trophy winner. Amar Johnson returns to replace Isaiah Davis at running back. Gus Miller is the best center in the FCS and maybe one of the best centers in the country. We'll see him come draft this offseason. They bring back 8 of their top 13 tacklers, which was a really good defense last year. You've got big-bodied wide receivers in Griffin Wild and Graham Goring. And listen, obviously we know a lot about Oklahoma State and what they return, but we know Oklahoma State has struggled in out-of-conference games with Mike Gundy there. I mean, last year they got blown out by South Alabama. South Alabama team, barely made a bowl game last year. Listen, I don't know. This will be one I cannot wait to be Saturday afternoon, and you're flipping through the channels, and it is a close game in the second half there, and who knows what happens after that. Is that crazy there?
No, I love that feeling. I love that flipping through the channel Saturday afternoon feeling, and you see Oklahoma State on the ropes. Oh my goodness. I want that to happen.
All right,
Would be awesome.
You got another
second one? It'll be, again, we talked about road dogs is never a good thing to be. I'm sorry, home dogs is a scary thing for road teams. Boise State on the road, traveling across the country to Georgia Southern. 13-point line, I believe, for Boise State. Listen, man, Georgia Southern, I know they disappointed you last year. They disappointed me too. Clay Helton, what they did. Obviously, Davis Brin is gone, but I think there's optimism there that this could be an improved football team. You kind of have an identity there with Jalen White and OJ Arnold running the football. JC French is coming, named the starter there, who looked solid at times and took care of the football when he was in there a little bit. Derwin Burgess is back. Dalen Cobb is back. You bring in Buckley Shelton, who's talented kid from the Power 5. Your O-line's question mark. But listen, I mean, we're talking about road dogs. They're 14-point dogs, 13-point dogs for a reason. But the talent is there. Clay Helton, we saw them shock Nebraska a couple years ago. I don't think this is crazy. Boise State's being heralded basically already as Mountain West champions, and I don't know if I see that yet in them, and especially going on the road early. And they're probably looking ahead to Oregon. I think they got Oregon next week. Who knows, man? Who knows? Give me Georgia Southern. Let's go Sun Belt. Let's go Clay Helton.
Can either of y'all tell me the difference between a bison and a buffalo?
North American versus African.
Yeah, it's about a 10-point difference according to Vegas right now. Colorado,
Oh,
the home favorite in this game. It's not going to happen. Do you believe? I do not. North Dakota State might have the advantage in the trenches this game. We're going North Dakota State winning on the road. Thursday night, I'm going to be watching this simultaneously with CD's Minnesota Gophers. It's going to be a great night of football. I love the Colorado movie. I'm all aboard. I try not to miss a game. I don't care if they win or lose. I want the most entertaining outcome possible. North Dakota State wins at Colorado. I don't have a strong feeling, but that's just a gut feeling for you right there. I prefer Bison anyway. All right, my second one. I'm going to go with the gut feeling. Y'all talked me into it. I mentioned it to you guys off stream earlier. Sam Houston on the road at Rice, just down the road. Tell me why I'm right in picking Sam Houston in this one.
well, you're at Rice over there. You're missing JT Daniels, right? Who underratedly, I think, elevated that Rice offense like big time. Like I think he elevated that offense big. And you saw in the bowl game, right? When he was not in the game there, their offense struggled and they turned the ball over and they made mistakes. It just did not look the same. Now they'll have a strong rushing attack there. Dean Connors being probably one of the better running backs returning in the American Conference. But look, Sam Houston, how many games should they have won last year and lost? I mean, that was incredible. And by the way, a program that's not used to losing those close games at all, back when they're in that FCS level, a program adept at winning at the highest level. It'll be interesting to see. I don't who's the wide receiver? Is it Noah Brown? No.
Smith?
Noah Smith, the wide receiver there at Sam Houston. Definitely could find his matchups there against Rice. I think, dude, I don't hate it at all, man. The in-state, you don't got to travel far. I mean, it's basically Conroe to Houston. I mean, it's not that far. I guess not Conroe. Well, what's that? Whatever that town is.
Yeah, something like that. I'm blanking.
It's on Lake Conroe, whatever. That's not that far at all. Literally not that far. So I'm yeah, I don't hate that from you at all, Drew.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I totally agree, and that's why I'm picking them.
I love it, man. I love it. And your Dakota pick too, man. Matt Rule said it best. He said he's talking to Pat McAfee, and he was like, he tells his AD, he's like, I do not want to see any of the Dakota schools in week 1. That is a recipe for disaster for your team. And he's absolutely right. We got 2 of them. Obviously, South Dakota State and North Dakota State should be fighting entertaining games, if not, or wow, I don't know what the fuck I'm saying. Sorry, it's late right now. But upset alert's fun.
I know. Fun. We're keeping Drew way later than he probably bargained for. We're gonna really quickly go to the counter. All right, cash some picks here. All right, I already printed that Texas A&M -1. That was on Twitter. Okay, follow us on Twitter at the Redshirt Soft to get that one when it comes out. Okay. Now, if there's a pick that comes out Friday night before Saturday, don't take those because historically my picks have stunk, including the ones that came out last week. SMU first half -14. That was terrible. And then obviously Florida State -10 would have touched 10 briefly there. I thought it was awesome value. Stunk. All right. But the show picks last year were awesome. So you guys just gotta believe. All right. Unlike Drew in the Colorado Buffaloes over there. Texas A&M -1, USC +4.5. Teased it a little bit earlier. Love that matchup. Troy, Nevada under 45.5. You need to hop on that right now because that is literally about to cross over 45, and that's a key number. So if you want that, you got to get it now. Northwestern and Miami, Ohio under 42.5 as well. I know you get Blaine Gabbert back there at Miami, but I think this game's they're gonna try to slow down both teams. Arkansas State -9 against Central Arkansas. Why is Arkansas State a team that can compete in the Sun Belt at the highest level? Why are they only 9-point favorites against Central Arkansas? I know they got a stud running back there, but I don't know. Maybe this is like a negligence pick. Like maybe I'm just being naive. Okay, but I see that line. I'm like, I have to jump on it. Arizona -30.5 is the last one against New Mexico. New Mexico's frauds. I don't care what you saw last week. Okay, they stink bad. Ted McMillan's playing. Here we go. Let's go Wildcats.
I got 2. Call me crazy. This is crazy. This is insane. It's probably because it's past midnight. I'm thinking about this game too much. I'm still sticking with A&M on the under at 46.5. A&M Notre Dame.
I don't hate it.
This is a low-scoring game. I don't think either offense really finds what you would call rhythm in this game. It's going to be a slugfest. It's going to be a battle won Well, I think I'm calling it a battle that's won in the trenches for A&M. So it's going to be a low scoring affair. You would have had free money at 50.5, but you still get money at 46.5. There's still value there unless it gets below 45, which, you never know what could happen last minute, but 46.5, I'm still there. I'm going over LSU USC at 63.5. I just think it's an insane shootout. Okay. I'm thinking like a 45-35 kind of a game. I'm over there.
Yeah, I don't think you're crazy at all. I mean, I would imagine that's how it plays out as well. And it opened. Wait, what did you say you were going to get it at? 63.5.
That's what I saw.
That opened at 66.5. So I think that's probably the best value that you're going to see that. So I think that's a wonderful pick.
Awesome.
So
I got one here. I got one here, and it's going to be Akron plus 49.5. I will lay all
Wait,
those
it's not at 50.5 anymore?
I got it at 49.5. I actually went old fashioned. I went to the counter and got my ticket.
Yeah. What a sicko. I
was at the casino there and I had to rip it. Listen, I think Ben Finley, who's still in college football, still has 2 years of eligibility, by the way. Akron might be one of the worst football teams in America, but 49.5 is so much. I think Ohio State kind of leans into this season and not sleepwalk through it, but I don't think they're pushing to put up 50 points in this game. I think Akron's defense can do it. And by the way, if you start getting into the reserves, yes, we love the depth of this Ohio State team, but not at the running back spot. If you're trying to run and bleed the clock, I don't quite know if you've got the guys to just run up and down the field against Akron. Give me the zips, man. I cannot wait to be sweating that out in the fourth quarter.
So crazy. That's sicko stuff. All right. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in to the Redshirt Sophomore Week 1 preview. And thank you to Drewtamu for checking us out and coming on the show because he's just a good guy, right? And make sure you check out his YouTube channel as well for the best Texas A&M YouTube content that really there is. I mean, you just had a live show. Or you came straight from your live show. You've been at this microphone thing for like 6 hours. So
that's true. That's crazy.
So shout out Drew. He is absolutely a monster. So I'm going to drop all of his stuff and his socials and his channel and make sure you guys have to check him out. All right. Even if like you're not a Texas A&M fan, right? If your team is playing against Texas A&M, like this is a guy that you want to be catching up with. Make sure you check out his channel and SEC football too. He's keeping up with all of it. So yeah, you guys need to check out Drewtamu. So thank you, Drew, for coming on again, man. You gave some dude, and I texted you these games yesterday, and you had some research ready to go, man, and that was short notice, dude.
That was tough. These are okay. If you want to learn the sport, learn the ins and outs, learn the personnel, learn what's happening, you follow the Redshirt Sophomore podcast. You get after it with these boys. They stay on it. I mean, look at us. We're absolute sickos going 2 hours on Week 1 picks. Look at this. You don't get this anywhere else. You gotta check these guys out. Subscribe to these gentlemen here. If you're coming from my side of things, they're gonna have you covered, man. They're gonna make you some money.
CD, anything for us on the way out?
No, I want to echo what you said about Drew. We thank you so much. Obviously, everything Matthew said. Check out his socials. Check out his channel. He's incredible, and obviously gave us a lot of time. Got a lot of great info today from him. We always enjoy having him on, and our relationship between Drewtamu and the Redshirt Sophomore.
Thank you, CD.
Absolutely.
And we'll see y'all in the next one.